After Li Wei left, Lin Shi sat cross-legged, observing Xu Jin. No matter how much pain Xu Jin was in, he remained completely still. Sweat from the agony poured out, soaking Xu Jin's hair and clothes. Her thin white shirt clung to her slender, alluring figure, revealing and then concealing her curves. If it were any ordinary young man, alone in a room with a helpless beauty, even without ill intentions, it would be enough to make his heart pound, legs tremble, and face flush crimson. But Lin Shi felt no stir of emotion whatsoever. 10 minutes later, the pained expression on Xu Jin's face vanished. Her body gradually recovered. She weakly opened her eyes, looking around. Where am I? I'm not dead? Lin Shi helped Xu Jin sit up against the wall. This is the stadium. Were you sick just now? Sick? I wasn't sick. I don't know what happened. First, I fainted. Then suddenly I felt intense pain all over my body. Xu Jin had a bewildered and frightened expression. The pain just now had been absolutely terrifying. Lin Shi's eyes flickered slightly. His suspicion that Xu Jin had unintentionally activated a gene grew stronger. Before you entered the stadium, did you experience anything unusual or feel anything strange? Xu Jin shook her head. I was too scared. I just ran. But I ran for a while, then fainted. Who saved me? Who brought me here? Was it you, Lin Shi? She stared intently at Lin Shi. That soldier saved you. Lin Shi flatly denied it. Xu Jin lowered her head. The dim light made it impossible to see her expression clearly. Where is that soldier? He went to find a doctor. Xu Jin fell silent. After a long moment, she asked softly, Why? Why didn't you save me? Why didn't you come back for us? If you had just slowed down a little, used your flashlight to show us the way, Xiao Xiao wouldn't have died. Why? Why are you so cold-hearted? You caused Xiao Xiao's death by the end. Xu Jin was practically screaming. Throughout her recent agony, she had remained conscious. She had also heard the conversation between Lin Shi and Li Wei. She just couldn't speak. Having gone through so much danger, Xu Jin's nerves were stretched to their absolute limit, and those questions just now were the last straw. Before she died, Xiao Xiao had called her name, but she hadn't turned back, hadn't even stopped. Her conscience couldn't accept responsibility for Li Xiao Xiao's death, so she pushed all the blame onto Lin Shi. Xu Jin, full of resentment and accusation, her red-rimmed eyes glared at Lin Shi. Lin Shi's gaze was icy, a murderous aura flickering in his eyes. He had been through this too many times. Call him cold and heartless or self-serving, it wouldn't be wrong. The bloody lessons of the apocalypse had taught him not to waste his efforts or good intentions on anyone. Even though Lin Shi was the one who saved Xu Jin, she still believed he had caused Li Xiaoxiao's death. What right did Xu Jin have to think that? Lin Shi and Li Xiaoxiao had no connection whatsoever. What reason did he have to risk his life to save her? Lin Shi thought for a moment. A dagger appeared in his hand. He couldn't let someone who hated him live, especially someone with the potential to unlock a gene. That was a threat to him. Lin Shi's gaze terrified Xu Jin. She recoiled, but behind her was a cold wall. Hasty footsteps echoed from outside the gym. Lin Shi retracted his dagger. Li Wei rushed in, pulling someone along. Teacher Xu Jin, you're awake, he exclaimed, overjoyed. Lin Shi stood straight, noticing the man in a white coat, carrying a medical kit, standing behind Li Wei. The man stepped forward, kneeling down to examine Xu Jin. Xu Jin, are you all right? Do you feel any discomfort? This person knew Xu Jin. Xu Jin was surprised. Dr. Suo, Lin Shi, and Li Wei stood to the side, watching Dr. Suo question and examine Xu Jin. Lin Shi didn't ask Li Wei, whose face was bruised and battered, how he managed to find a doctor, but simply listened as Xu Jin recounted her story. Xu Jin's story was identical to what she had told Lin Shi earlier. Dr. Suo suddenly turned, saying to Lin Shi and Li Wei, Xu Jin is quite badly injured. I'll bandage her up. You two wait outside for a bit, okay? Xu Jin lowered her head, embarrassed. Lin Shi turned away. Li Wei followed closely, conveniently closing the gym door behind them. As soon as the door closed, Xu Jin immediately buried herself in Dr. Suo's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. It turned out that when Dr. Suo leaned in to examine her, she had used his body to shield herself. She had tugged on his coat and written "Save me" on his palm. Oh, Dr. Suo, someone wants to kill me just now. Xu Jin had used the light to see Lin Shi's shadow reflected in the glass. She had also seen Lin Shi pull a dagger out of thin air. Lin Shi wanted to kill her doctor. Suo felt the softness in his arms, and a flicker of desire appeared in his eyes. He gently patted Xu Jin's back, comforting her. Tell me slowly, he said. What happened? Lin Shi and Li Wei stood outside the door. Li Wei hesitated, then said to Lin Shi, The escort mission is complete. I'm heading back. Hearing Li Wei say he wanted to leave, Lin Shi nodded. Li Wei took out his only portion of rations from his backpack and handed it to Lin Shi. You two can share this later. When it's time to sleep, blow out the candle. Don't waste it. Things will be tough later." With that, Li Wei left immediately, not giving Lin Shi a chance to refuse. He had only taken a few steps when he heard Lin Shi's voice from behind. "Actually, you shouldn't blame yourself. If you hadn't run with me then, all three of you would be dead." Hearing Lin Shi say that, Li Wei stopped, his eyes welling up. Li Wei thought no one knew how much he was suffering inside. Lin Shi's question was the very same one he had been asking himself. Why did I see death and not save them? He recalled the moment he stood in the hailstorm, watching Lin Shi run off with the flashlight. Li Wei had been terrified. His act of fleeing then was a natural reflex. He had been enlisted for less than 2 years, originally just fulfilling his military service. Suddenly, he received orders to prepare for combat, becoming a regular soldier. Then he received news that the outside world had undergone massive changes and unforeseen events could happen in the future. He was only 21. He knew fear, and he was afraid to die, but he was a soldier, and protecting the people was a soldier's duty. His actions then were tantamount to deserting on the battlefield. Only after reaching safety did he remember there were 2 female students behind him. So, when he heard Shu Jin's cries for help, Li Wei dared to risk his life, running out and carrying Shu Jin back. Only then did he dare to risk his life to find a military doctor when Shu Jin seemed on the verge of death. Saving one person somewhat alleviated the guilt in his heart. What Lin Shi said wasn't wrong. If he hadn't run then, all 3 of them truly could have died in the hailstorm. Although he still couldn't completely erase the feeling of guilt, his mood had lightened considerably. A flicker of gratitude appeared in Li Wei's eyes. He nodded at Lin Shi, then left. Lin Shi looked at the rations in his hand. His initially icy gaze softened slightly. He collected the items and put them in his bag. Some people gravitate towards the light, others fall into darkness. Although Lin Shi considered himself not a good person, he didn't reject truly good people, because good people often died quickly. Moreover, one death meant one less person. A moment later, the gym door opened. Dr. Suo said, "All right, you can come in now." Lin Shi stepped into the gym, found a secluded spot, and sat down. Zhu Jin watched the door intently. When no one else entered, her eyes slightly unfocused, she looked at Lin Shi and asked, "Where's that soldier?" "He went back," Lin Shi replied indifferently. "He just left, without even saying goodbye?" Zhu Jin's voice rose slightly. "His mission was complete once he got you to the school gate. Just because he saved your life, do you want to repay him with your body?" Lin Shi retorted sarcastically. Zhu Jin's face stiffened. Ignoring Zhu Jin further, Lin Shi closed his eyes to rest. A look of awkwardness appeared in Zhu Jin's eyes. She turned to look at Dr. Suo. Dr. Suo shook his head at her, then said loudly, "Let's just rest here for the night, okay?" Zhu Jin found a comfortable spot to lie down. "I'm blowing out the candle now." Zhu Jin lay down. The candle was extinguished. Dr. Suo also lay down. Silence fell around them. From within the darkness, a very faint rustling of fabric could be heard. Then silence returned. Who knows how much time passed? In the darkness, the faint rustling of fabric sounded again. Zhu Jin suddenly opened her eyes in the dark, reaching out to touch Dr. Suo lying beside her. Dr. Suo also opened his eyes. Both their eyes were wide open, showing no sign of sleepiness. Clearly, neither of them had been sleeping. In the darkness, Dr. Suo couldn't clearly see Zhu Jin's expression. He gently patted the back of Zhu Jin's hand. Signaling reassurance, he slowly stood up. He pulled a sharp surgical knife from his coat pocket. He had taken off his shoes at some point, and his footsteps made no sound whatsoever. In the darkness, only the negligible rustling of fabric could be heard. Zhu Jin also sat up. Her heart pounded, thumping as if it would leap out of her throat. She covered her chest, afraid her heartbeat was too loud and would wake Lin Shi. Knowing Lin Shi intended to kill her, she immediately sought help from her acquaintance, Dr. Suo. Initially, the person she most wanted to ask for help was Li Wei, but before she could find him, Li Wei had vanished without a trace. Dr. Suo told Zhu Jin that for the past 2 days, neither the police nor the hospital could be contacted. The entire city had lost power, and communication was cut off. He even suspected that the entire Exia kingdom, or even the eastern and western hemispheres, had been hit by a solar storm. Today, the principal even ran to the nearby police station for help, but the police station was overwhelmed, severely understaffed. The school received no effective assistance. Perhaps the collapse of order was only a matter of time. Zhu Jin was frightened by Dr. Suo's words. She recalled Dr. Suo's words. "I like you, Xiao Jin. I can't let anyone harm you. I can help you kill him. As long as you're with me, I'll do anything. I'll do anything for you." Dr. Suo's gaze made Zhu Jin feel strange. She thought of Lin Shi wanting to kill her. If she did nothing, she would die. She didn't want to die. Why did Lin Shi dare to kill? Why was he so ruthless? Wasn't it because there was no longer any order? Even if someone killed, no one would care, right? Then if Lin Shi was killed, no one would know either. Shujin found her own justification. Finally, she agreed to Dr. Suo's plan, but Shujin didn't realize why Dr. Suo dared to kill. In the darkness, Dr. Suo wore a cold smile. These 2 days had been paradise for him. Since the school received news of the solar storm outbreak yesterday, and by over 10 o'clock this morning, most students had experienced unexplained dizziness and nausea. Many students fell into a coma, and even some of the school's medics did too. Only Dr. Suo had no reaction whatsoever, just a slight nausea. In the midst of the emergency, the teachers who hadn't fallen into a coma brought the students to the infirmary. The school doctor treated most of them. At first, he examined them properly, but soon discovered that no matter what he tried, the comatose students wouldn't wake up. However, their lives weren't in any danger. The school doctor gazed at the unresponsive female students in their beds, and a wicked thought suddenly crossed his mind. He acted on it, time and time again, and no one ever found out. He'd heard from the school guard that the surveillance system was down, and the police were unreachable. The school doctor grew bolder and bolder. In the span of a single day and night, he assaulted over 10 female students, reveling in their youthful beauty, completely lost in his depravity. But this morning, as he was assaulting one of the girls, she suddenly woke up. The moment she regained consciousness, she began to struggle and scream for help. In a panic, the school doctor killed her. He then stuffed her body into a large trash bag and hid it in an unused refrigerator. After that, he used the drugs from the infirmary to inject the other comatose girls, ensuring they remained unconscious. He then continued his vile acts. 2 of the girls never woke up, having been given a fatal overdose. The entire school was in a state of panic and chaos due to the sudden catastrophe, so even after a full day and night had passed, no one noticed what he had done. If anyone asked about the missing girls, the school doctor simply told them they had already left. That night, as he was about to move on to another girl in the infirmary, he suddenly heard screams from outside. Seeing Li Wei in a military uniform, he was scared out of his wits, thinking he'd been exposed. But to his surprise, Li Wei was only there to ask for help. He followed Li Wei to the stadium. Later, Shuqin also came to him for help. Knowing that Li Wei was just an escort who would be leaving soon, the school doctor decided he wanted to kill Lin Shai. He then manipulated Shu Qin into agreeing to help him. This time, he didn't want to defile another unresponsive body. He wanted to truly enjoy himself, to savor a young, vibrant woman. All he had to do was kill that brat, and he could have Xu Qin, the beauty he'd coveted for so long. At the thought, the excitement in the school doctor's eyes grew more intense. He rushed to the spot where Lin Shi had been sitting. The school doctor raised the gleaming scalpel high and plunged it down viciously. A cold light flashed as the blade sliced through the air, aimed directly at the spot where Lin Shi lay. Shu Qin couldn't see clearly, but the mere thought of a bloody scene was enough to make her want to scream. She quickly clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle the sound. However, the gory spectacle she imagined never came to pass. The school doctor's blade struck nothing. He froze, his expression changing drastically. "Where is he? Are you looking for me?" A powerful beam of light suddenly cut through the darkness, accompanied by Lin Shi's voice. Lin Shi stood 2 meters from the school doctor, holding an intensely bright flashlight. Its brilliant beam cut through the darkness that had enveloped the entire gym. This time, Shu Qin couldn't help but scream in terror. "How did you get over there? I distinctly remember you were sleeping right here." The school doctor shielded his eyes with one hand, blinded by the intense light, while pointing the scalpel at Lin Shi with the other. "I just blew out the candle and moved to a different spot to sleep," Lin Shi answered. "Impossible, we didn't hear you make a single sound, and where did you get that flashlight?" Shu Qin's face was a mask of panic now that they'd been caught. Lin Shi shrugged, answering her questions. "I don't know whether to call you too clever or just stupid. All I had to do was move before he lay down. The noise he made would cover any sound I made. The flashlight? It was in my backpack, of course. By the way, what are you two doing up in the middle of the night, planning to kill me?" Lin Shi smiled, turning his head to ask Shu Qin. "But I have a habit, I never sleep in the same room as strangers. If I did, I'd never be able to sleep." After living through the apocalypse, he was all too familiar with the evil in people's hearts. The moment he saw the school doctor, he recognized the murderous aura of someone who had recently killed. That's why he'd cautiously moved his sleeping spot after the candle was extinguished. Besides, after his rebirth, Lin Shi was extremely sensitive to people's gazes. Even in the dark, he could sense their faint killing intent. That's why he'd been awake for a long time. It seems they really don't want to live to see another day. Lin Shi's eerie smile, coupled with the current situation, sent an involuntary shiver down Shu Qin's spine. Was this person really the Lin Shi she knew? Lin Shi didn't say another word. He lunged forward, effortlessly snatching the scalpel from the doctor's hand and plunging it directly into his chest. No, Shu Qin's scream came at the exact moment the blade pierced the school doctor's heart. The move was so fast the doctor had no time to react. He looked down at his chest in utter disbelief. The scalpel snapped, leaving only the blood-soaked hilt embedded in his chest as the wound blossomed. He collapsed to the ground instantly. Lin Shi, as calm as ever, turned to look at the terrified, speechless Shu Qin. Ever since waking up after the storm, he'd realized his physical abilities were extraordinary. His speed, strength, and reflexes were all far beyond what they used to be. Shu Qin's eyes widened in terror, her body frozen to the spot as she trembled uncontrollably. Don't kill me! Realizing her fate was sealed, Shu Qin begged desperately. I'll be your girlfriend, please. Don't kill me. You can do whatever you want with me. I'm begging you, Lin Shi. We were good friends back in high school. The truth is, I've always liked you. A flicker of hope appeared in Shu Qin's desperate eyes as she forced a look of adoration onto her face. All right, I'll give you a chance, Lin Shi said with a smile, but his eyes were ice cold and his voice was bone-chilling. I'm going to shoot you. If you can dodge it, I'll let you live. Shu Qin jumped, looking as if she'd seen a ghost when Lin Shi materialized a pistol in his hand and aimed it straight at her. I'll count down from 3, and then I'll fire. Without giving her a chance to argue, Lin Shi immediately began the countdown. 3. Shu Qin stared in utter despair. Suddenly, the look in her eyes changed. Before he even reached 1, Lin Shi pulled the trigger. In that instant, Shu Qin's entire demeanor changed. Her pupils shrank to pinpricks. Though it should have been impossible to dodge the bullet, her body tilted just slightly. She dodged it. She dodged the bullet. Shu Qin was ecstatic, cheering silently in her heart. I did it, I dodged it. But before the triumphant smile could fade from her face, a blossom of blood suddenly bloomed on her shoulder. She cried out in pain and collapsed, clutching the wound. Lin Shi fired again. You could only dodge 1? He sounded disappointed. He had only wanted to see if Shu Qin had any value to offer before she died, to test whether she could unlock her genetic potential in a life-or-death situation. This time, he was certain. Shu Qin had unlocked her genes. Lin Shi was now about 70% certain that gene unlocking was possible, but it also came with unfathomable, life-threatening risks. You liar. Shu Qin tried to demand why Lin Shi had broken his promise, but a second later, she collapsed, her body racked with violent convulsions. 8 seconds. That's how long it took from the moment Shu Qin dodged the bullet to when she collapsed. Lin Shi stared intently at her. This time, she didn't fall into a coma, but she was exhibiting the same reaction as before. Observing her closely, Lin Shi noted that the side effects of the gene unlocking were even more severe this time. Blood trickled from her mouth, her eyes were completely bloodshot, and she was unable to make a sound. She glared at Lin Shi, her intentions clear in her eyes. Lin Shi simply watched her with cold detachment. 17 minutes later, the side effects of the gene unlocking subsided, and Shu Qin lapsed into a coma. Lin Shi put away his pistol and stabbed Shu Qin through the heart, ending her life. He glanced at his watch. It was past 3 in the morning. He had to leave. After a moment of consideration, he stored the bodies of the school doctor and Shu Qin in his dimensional space. This was to prevent anyone from discovering anything from the bodies later. Outside, a strong wind had kicked up at some point, rattling the glass windows of the gym. The temperature in the room, which had been in the teens before he went to sleep, had now dropped to around 10 degrees Celsius. It was likely only 5 or 6 degrees outside. Lin Shi changed into a warmer set of clothes, grabbed his flashlight, and left the Jiaxi Art Academy. The streets were pitch black and frighteningly silent, the ground still slick with water from the earlier hailstorm. After a few hundred meters, Lin Shi took out his resonance bicycle, strapped the flashlight to the handlebars, and headed for the Jiaxi Sea Crossing Bridge. He now had several bodies in his dimensional space. While the space would keep them from decomposing, it also held a lot of his food supplies, so leaving them in there for long wasn't a good idea. Lin Shi planned to dispose of the bodies under the cover of darkness. After traveling a few kilometers, a fog began to roll in, reducing his visibility. He occasionally saw pale corpses on the road, battered by the hail. Some had half their heads caved in, brains splattered across the pavement, their flesh a mangled mess of blood and gore. In the dead of night, the scene was incredibly grim and horrifying, but Lin Shi's expression remained unchanged. He had witnessed countless deaths during the apocalypse, and had long since become immune to such sights. The hailstorm in Jiaxi had occurred at night. If it had been like the one in Haishi from his past life, which struck during the day, the death toll would have been much higher. About 20 minutes later, Lin Shi tossed the bodies into the sea, where they landed with a series of heavy splashes. he took the opportunity to wash his disaster-proof SUV, rinsing the blood from its frame. Then, he drove directly toward the safe zone. At this hour, hardly anyone was outside. Even if people heard the engine, they wouldn't be able to see who was driving. The SUV had high clearance, so he didn't need to get out to clear the corpses from the road. He could just drive right over them. It was much easier than using the resonance bicycle. Naturally, Lin Shi wasn't foolish enough to be riding a bike at a time like this. As he drove through the city center, a few people heard the sound of a car passing below their windows. "Honey, wake up! I hear a car. Don't be silly, darling. Go back to sleep. You must have been dreaming." A car? Who could possibly be driving a car now? Someone opened their window to look down, but a blast of cold wind hit them in the face, and they quickly shut it. There were occasional corpses and obstacles on the road, so Lin Shi didn't drive too fast. Lin Shi kept his speed between 50 and 60. Early in the morning, he temporarily stored his spatial vehicle and switched to an electric bike. As dawn broke, he pedaled along, noticing the pedestrians were even more hurried than yesterday. Most were young, able-bodied men. Yesterday, many were still in short sleeves. Today, everyone wore long sleeves and jackets. However, most people's clothes looked quite shabby. Lin Shi thought to himself that in Jia City, a place that felt like summer year-round, the locals had almost no preparation for winter. The fog grew thicker, and small snowflakes even began to drift down. This was a weather phenomenon almost impossible in Jia City. No matter how foolish someone was, they could sense something was wrong. Yesterday, people were scrambling for food. Today, they were rushing to buy clothes and bedding. On the road, many people's lips were purple from the cold, but despite the bone-chilling wind, they still had to go out. There were elderly and children at home who needed warmth. Yet, it was uncertain how many of these family breadwinners would return alive. The blizzard was coming. Lin Shi saw some people, driven by the cold, smashing the glass of closed shops to grab curtains or other items for warmth. Order was beginning to collapse. The apocalypse was coming. For survival, anything could happen. Around 6 in the morning, Lin Shi finally returned to Hualong village. The path to his safe house was at the back of the village. He needed to either go around or cut through the center. Knowing the temperament of the Hualong villagers, Lin Shi naturally chose the longer route to avoid trouble. But today, a group of villagers was surrounding the very path he had to take. On the concrete road outside the village, 10 villagers holding kitchen knives, cleavers, and various makeshift weapons were forming a circle in the middle of the road. A commotion broke out from within the circle. "Hit it! Beat it to death, Liang! Hurry up! It's so cold! I'm craving a pot of dog meat stew." "What are you afraid of? It's just a beast. There are so many of us. Just do it. Go on." Then in the middle of the villagers, a dog covered in wounds was baring its teeth, growling threateningly. Judging by its frame, it was a large dog. Its black fur was matted with yellow stains, obscuring its original color. Its round eyes flashed with ferocity, and its sharp fangs were stained with streaks of blood. Surprisingly, it had heterochromia. Its left eye was sea blue, while its right eye was deep red. It's just a beast. If we all rush it together, it can't bite everyone to death. Once it's dead, we'll each get a few pounds of meat. You can't even find meat at the market now. The speaker was Li Qiang, the man who had faked an accident at Lin Shi's safe house door a few days ago. Although Li Qiang's words made sense, no one dared to step up. Everyone was waiting for someone else to be the bait, so they could catch the dog safely. Who wanted to get bitten for nothing? The village chief, the oldest in the crowd, gave the order. "Fine. Qiang, Liang, you two are the strongest. You go." Li Qiang and Wang Liang looked at each other, understanding what was happening. Wang Liang said dissatisfiedly, "If that's the case, I'm going home." "Why is it always me and Qiang who have to step up?" Li Qiang chimed in. "Exactly. Last time you made me go up the mountain, my dad even broke his arm. That crazy guy still hasn't paid us back." Yesterday, Li Qiang had shouted himself hoarse, trying to break down Lin Shi's door, but Lin Shi never came out. He was already fuming, and now he hadn't gotten a dime. Medical expenses alone cost several thousand. Li Qiang muttered to himself that the next time he saw Lin Shi, he would definitely get his revenge. Unexpectedly, speak of the devil and he shall appear. The screech of brakes echoed. Obscured by the fog and snow, Lin Shi only realized people were 10 meters ahead when he got close. Lin Shi saw the villagers, and they naturally saw him too. Li Qiang raised his cleaver, pointed it straight at Lin Shi, and roared, "You little brat! I finally found you ignoring the dog!" Li Qiang quickly stepped in front of Lin Shi, blocking his path. He snarled, "Pay up for my father's medical bills, mental distress, and nutrition fees. It's 50,000 in total. I remember, it was only 5,000 last time." Lin Shi frowned, calmly getting off his bike. Li Qiang glared. "That was then. This is now a few days ago. Meat was 10,000 a pound. Now, you can't even buy a pound for 50,000. How can it be the same?" Other villagers surrounded Lin Shi too. By village custom, no matter how much money was extorted, it would be split. Compared to 50,000, a dog was nothing. And if I don't give it? Lin Shi asked calmly, showing no fear despite being surrounded. Not giving it? Heh. Do you think the weapons in our hands will agree, or are you planning to call the police? Go ahead, try it. One villager, clearly knowing that electronic devices were useless now, spoke without fear. Kid, this whole village and the surrounding mountains are our territory. Don't even think about leaving today without paying. That's right, hand it over or we'll break your legs, another villager holding a club shouted aggressively. Young man, if you don't compensate them, they'll beat you to death with those clubs, understand? The village chief pretended to advise him, but his hands behind his back were signaling. Seeing the signal, Li Qiang was overjoyed. He could finally avenge that slap from before. This time was different. He had 10 men with him. Li Qiang wasn't worried about Lin Shi resisting like last time. He was going to give this kid a lesson he'd never forget. Li Qiang grinned, took 2 steps toward Lin Shi, and raised his hand to slap him. He swung with all his might. If it hit, a normal person would surely be knocked flat. The other villagers watched with anticipation, but Lin Shi disappointed them. He caught Li Qiang's hand, and a resounding slap landed on Li Qiang's face instead. The scene was all too familiar, leaving Li Qiang dazed. The blow sent him spinning to the ground. The knife fell from his hand, his head was ringing, and he felt something in his mouth. He spat it out, 2 bloody teeth. Lin Shi clearly hadn't held back. The 10 villagers fell silent. The atmosphere became eerily still. There were 13 of them, and Lin Shi was alone. They had the absolute advantage and were armed. They never expected Lin Shi to dare resist while surrounded, let alone so violently. Li Qiang was livid. Only his family knew about the last time Lin Shi hit him, but he had never forgotten. Now, being slapped again in front of the whole village, the stinging pain triggered a surge of rage that rushed to his head. I'm going to kill you. Li Qiang scrambled up, grabbed his cleaver, and swung it at Lin Shi's head. It's been proven that some people, driven by momentary emotion, act without thinking and end up regretting it for a lifetime. At this moment, Li Qiang was completely blinded by rage. Li Qiang, stop! 2 shouts rang out simultaneously, but Li Qiang heard nothing. He still brought the blade down toward Lin Shi. Lin Shi saw the blade coming, but didn't move, looking as if he were in shock to the onlookers. The sight made even the most hardened villagers look away, but just then, a black shadow blurred past. Bang! A gunshot rang out, startling birds within 100 meters. Li Qiang's scream and the gunshot echoed almost at the same time. Slightly faster than the shot, a dog had clamped its jaws onto Li Qiang's left leg. It was the same dog the villagers had been hunting. It turned out the dog hadn't left after escaping. It had been lying quietly in the grass by the road. Lin Shi was slightly surprised. He had noticed the dog earlier but hadn't paid it any mind. He didn't expect it to help him just as Li Qiang attacked. Li Qiang was hit in the waist by the bullet. The cleaver fell with a clang, and as he collapsed, the dog immediately retreated. The gunshot startled everyone except Lin Shi. Back off everyone, stay still, drop your weapons, and put your hands up. 2 officers walked out from the village, their expressions grim, guns drawn. They had been ordered to notify the villages about cold prevention and food storage. Other villages were fine, but in Hulong village, they couldn't find the chief. After asking around, they learned he was out hunting a dog. They arrived just in time to witness the assault. The one who fired was one of the 2 officers, the same one who had shouted for him to stop. The villagers looked at the slumped Li Qiang, then at the guns in the officers' hands. They all hurriedly threw down their weapons. The sound of objects hitting the ground echoed everywhere. The officers approached. Get down by the roadside and squat in a line. The villagers complied. Lin Shi also obediently sat down, right next to Li Qiang. Li Qiang wasn't dead yet. He lay on the ground, his eyes bulging as he glared at Lin Shi. If looks could kill, Lin Shi would have been sliced into 1,000 pieces. Seeing Li Qiang's state, Lin Shi suddenly found it amusing. Most people would shudder in fear being glared at by a dying man, but Lin Shi wasn't most people. He parted his lips slightly, his mouth barely moving, whispering in a voice only the 2 of them could hear, "Die in peace. You won't be lonely. I'll send your parents and sister down to join you soon." Hearing this, Li Qiang's eyes nearly tore open. In a fit of rage, his legs kicked out once, his eyes rolled back, and he passed away. An officer came over to check on Li Qiang. Lin Shi quickly pulled back his expression, pretending to be a survivor in shock. The officer found that Li Qiang was dead and said to his colleague, "The assailant is dead." Then he asked Lin Shi, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Lin Shi replied, "I'm fine. Good thing you guys arrived in time." These villagers, the officers were about to make arrests when the village chief's eyes welled up. He knelt down, interrupting Lin Shi. "Oh heavens, what kind of calamity is this? the village chief cried mournfully, kneeling on the ground and beating his chest. Old lie! That brute broke your arm and your son, Li Qiang. He killed him. How can I ever repay your family? The village chief knelt amidst the villagers. Another person behind him subtly gestured, and the others immediately understood. Wang Liang's face was filled with indignation. He pointed at Li Qiang's 2 teeth on the ground. This scoundrel, not only did he chop off Li Qiang's father's arm, but when we asked for money for Li Qiang's medical treatment, he refused and even broke his teeth. Officers, look at these 2 teeth and look at Li Qiang's face. The security officers indeed saw the 2 teeth on the ground and examined Li Qiang's face. It was truly brutally beaten, swollen, red and purple. Li Qiang killing someone is a fact now. Let's see if this arrogant brat still dares to be so defiant once we've dealt with him. A sinister look flashed in Wang Liang's eyes. The village chief looked at Wang Liang with approval. He was indeed the successor he valued. Right, this young man was forced. He only acted in self-defense, but he beat people to this extent. Self-defense? Li Qiang died so tragically he has 2 elderly parents and an unmarried daughter at home. What are they going to do now? Is there any justice left in this world? These villagers had been coordinating for years, each speaking a line, their words flowing like water. The 2 security officers frowned and asked, "Did you hit him?" Lin Shi didn't deny it. "He attacked me with a knife first. I was just defending myself." Next time you encounter a situation like this, run first. Protecting your life is the most important thing, understand? A security officer patted Lin Shi's shoulder. This village was notorious far and wide. The 2 security officers had heard about it. They naturally didn't believe the villagers' words. They had seen with their own eyes the assailant holding a knife and attacking, and a group of villagers surrounding Lin Shi with weapons. More importantly, Lin Shi had no weapon at all. No matter how they looked at it, he was the victim. Lin Shi was a little surprised. This wasn't an act. He thought he'd have to argue with these villagers, but he quickly understood what was happening. The villagers' eyes widened. Normally, they relied on their numbers and seamless coordination to leave security officers helpless many times. Unfortunately, this time, numbers didn't mean they were right. "Officer, he hit someone." "Why are you biased towards him?" Wang Liang questioned indignantly. "Even if it was a brawl, it's no reason to kill someone," the security officer said. "Many of you surrounded him, a single person, with weapons. His self-defense was justified. We saw it with our own eyes. Each of you was holding these things and surrounding him, attempting to assault him," the other security officer continued. "We were holding these things to hit a dog," a villager explained. "Where's the dog?" The villagers looked around. The dog had already run away. "There's no dog anymore," the 2 officers said sternly to the villagers. "You all stay in the village and await investigation. Understood? These times are different from before. A few days ago, we would have thoroughly investigated and dealt with this severely, taking everyone back to the station. But now, we have more important matters to attend to." The 10 villagers' faces were filled with indignation. The villagers' ingrained fear of the police wouldn't change easily in a short time. Even knowing there was no supervision now, they didn't dare openly resist. Seeing the 10 villagers just glare without saying anything, the 2 officers exchanged glances and sighed inwardly. As people within the system, they understood better than ordinary folk that order was slowly slipping out of control. Even though the truth was clear, the 2 officers still pulled Lin Shi aside to re-ask about the entire incident, making a brief record. Lin Shi recounted in detail how Li Qiang's family staged the accident in front of his house, how he accidentally stepped on Li Qiang's hand, and how he had agreed to compensate 50,000, but was now being demanded 500,000, which led to the conflict. The 2 officers nodded. The incident matched their suspicions. One officer said to Lin Shi, "Come to town with us. We'll arrange accommodation for you. These are unstable times and this place is remote. It's hard for us to keep an eye on things." The meaning was clear. They were afraid the villagers would cause trouble for Lin Shi again. The villagers angrily gritted their teeth. "Damn cops!" Lin Shi unexpectedly refused. "I'm not going." The officer pulled Lin Shi aside and said in a low voice, "Once we leave, if the villagers come looking for trouble, we won't be able to help you." Lin Shi looked into the officer's eyes, realizing he was genuinely concerned for him. But he could only refuse, saying, "I can protect myself. I've learned a bit of martial arts. I'll be safe. They can't do anything to me." The 2 tried to persuade him a few more times, but seeing Lin Shi's resolve, they gave up. "If anything happens, just go to the nearest town police station for help." Lin Shi nodded slightly. "Ask for help? Impossible. Only the villagers will need to ask me for help." The 2 officers turned their backs to the villagers. At this moment, all 10 villagers revealed malicious and fierce expressions, staring at Lin Shi. Some even made provocative gestures. The village chief also looked at Lin Shi with a gloomy expression. They had never suffered such a great loss. Lin Shi faced their malice with only a sneer. An officer noticed Lin Shi's gaze and turned to look. The villagers immediately returned to normal. but the officer still caught a few malicious glances. You all go home. Don't go out these next few days. Village chief, you stay. The officer decided to give the village chief a stern warning. The other villagers glared fiercely at Lin Shi one last time before leaving. You should go home too. Try not to go out these days. Stay warm and prepare food, the officer instructed Lin Shi. Lin Shi nodded in response. He got on his electric bicycle. Before leaving, Lin Shi glanced at the patch of grass where the dog had hidden earlier. It was empty. Perhaps he had unintentionally saved that dog. That dog had rushed out to save him when Li Qiang attacked. What a grateful dog. Lin Shi suddenly felt a pang of regret for giving up his previous intention of getting a dog. The journey back up the mountain was quite smooth, but when he returned to the mountaintop, he saw a black dog curled up by the gate. Lin Shi's mood suddenly lifted. Are you waiting for me? Ma Wang just looked at Lin Shi, not saying anything. Lin Shi casually put his electric bicycle into his spatial storage. He didn't need to hide anything from a dog, but he still unconsciously glanced at its expression. Ma Wang stared at Lin Shi's hand as he put the bicycle into his spatial storage. Its head tilted slightly. A strange look of wonder appeared in its intelligent eyes. It seemed not to understand how this hand could make objects disappear. This large dog making such a face looked truly amusing. It also proved that this dog was very intelligent. Lin Shi had originally intended to get a husky, but because his warehouse burned down and the sled was destroyed, he gave up on that idea. It can't talk, so it won't reveal his secrets. It also won't betray him. Although he had never owned a dog, he had heard that dogs were very loyal to their owners. Perhaps this dog wasn't a bad choice. Lin Shi tried to approach Ma Wang a few steps. Ma Wang stood up and took a step back, looking wary. Lin Shi stopped, feeling a little disappointed. This dog seemed to be a stray. Perhaps it was abandoned and had been hurt before. It was normal for it not to like people getting close. If it didn't accept him, he wouldn't force it. Yesterday at the port, in a box of pet supplies, Lin Shi casually took out a bag of dog food from his spatial storage and placed it in front of it. Here, boy, go on home. Then he walked around Ma Wang and headed for the door. He hadn't walked many steps when he felt a familiar gaze behind him. Lin Shi turned around. Ma Wang was holding the dog food in its mouth and following him. His eyes lit up. Remembering something, he said, "That time in the forest? Was that you?" After speaking, Lin Shi chuckled. How could a dog understand what he was saying? But this dog was smarter than Lin Shi imagined. It dropped the dog food, barked, and wagged its tail. It really is you. Do you want to come home with me? Lin Shi said, half believing. Woof. Ma Wang, holding the dog food, took a few steps closer to Lin Shi, then stopped and watched Lin Shi's expression, as if confirming Lin Shi wasn't bothered by its proximity. Finally, it slowly came in front of Lin Shi, lay down on the ground, gently wagged its tail, and looked up at Lin Shi. This time, Lin Shi no longer had any doubts. This dog understood what he was saying. He bent down and reached out to pet the dog's head. Ma Wang instinctively wanted to shy away, but in the end, it didn't move, allowing Lin Shi to place his hand on its head and stroke its fur. These reactions showed that it unconsciously resisted human touch. Lin Shi understood. If he hadn't coincidentally saved it, with this dog's hostility and wariness towards humans, it wouldn't have accepted him so quickly. It seems we have quite a connection, Lin Shi smiled, looking directly into those strange eyes. He said seriously, let's go, home. From now on, we'll rely on each other. Ma Wang also looked at Lin Shi seriously, as if responding in silence. Bringing Ma Wang into the room, Lin Shi checked its wounds. This dog had quite severe external injuries. Its fur was filthy, with many patches of hair loss. Its skin was abraded, mostly fresh wounds, still bleeding. Many wounds were hidden by its black, dirty fur. If Lin Shi hadn't observed it closely, he wouldn't have realized the dog was so severely injured. Yet, it was still able to rush out and bite people as if nothing was wrong. You're truly a tough guy, Lin Shi said helplessly. Such severe wounds, if left untreated, this dog would get infected and die in just a few days. He only hoped it wasn't injured elsewhere. I want to treat your wounds. I'll have to shave your fur. It'll hurt a bit. Try to bear with it, okay? Seeing the dog didn't react, Lin Shi took out disinfectant, a razor, gauze, and sutures from his spatial storage, then began to treat the wounds, shaving, disinfecting, suturing, applying medicine, bandaging. It took over 3 hours before Lin Shi finished treating all the wounds. Finally, he injected half a tube of anti-inflammatory medicine. Throughout the entire process, without any Western medicine, the dog didn't struggle or bark. It very obediently endured Lin Shi's torture. You're truly a tough guy. It didn't make a sound until he finished treating the wounds, even though his technique wasn't gentle. Lin Shi patted the dog's head and took out a blanket to cover it. There were too many wounds, and the dog's fur was very dirty, even matted in places. He had shaved off all the fur on its body. Now it looked naked, quite funny. After shaving its fur, he realized the dog was very thin. Its ribs were clearly visible on its belly. Feeling the air getting colder, Lin Shi turned on the heater. The warm air quickly dispelled the chill in the living room. After cleaning up the mess on the floor, Lin Shi began to prepare dinner. As soon as he entered the kitchen, he saw the dog following him, lying quietly by his feet. "You just had several stitches. Don't move around too much. Go wait in the living room." The dog wagged its tail and obediently left. "Oh, right. Maybe I should give you a name, shouldn't I?" Lin Shi suddenly had an idea. He had never owned a pet since he was little, mainly because that woman didn't like small animals or fur shedding in the house. Therefore, he had no experience raising pets. He heard they should be given names. The dog stopped, looking expectantly at Lin Shi. Lin Shi looked at the naked dog, its body covered in scars. He pondered deeply. "Patchwork? Stone killer? What do you think?" The dog clearly looked downcast. "Haha, I'm just kidding with you." With a new member in the house, Lin Shi couldn't help but feel happier. "How about Ma Wang?" "Yes, Ma Wang. Yes, Ma Wang." Yes, dinner had a lot of meat. Seeing that Ma Wang liked raw meat, Lin Shi directly took a block of raw beef from his spatial storage for it. One man and one dog ate their fill. While they were resting, a noise came from outside the door. Bang, 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 bang. Someone was breaking down the door. Over a dozen people, young and old, men and women, holding farm tools or clubs, stood menacingly in front of Lin Shi's house. Leading them was the strong young man he had met outside the village this morning, Wang Liang, and another person who were using hoes to smash the door. But no matter how much they hit it, only a few dents appeared on the door. There was no sign of it breaking. "Oh, my poor child, you died so tragically. Why is my fate so bitter?" White hair sending off black hair Auntie Li, supported by Li Kui Kui, cried amidst the crowd. "Today, we must break down this door, avenge Li Qiang. We must make that brat pay with his life. Avenge Li Qiang." The angry shouts of over a dozen people echoed through the mountain. Although Li Qiang wasn't killed by Lin Shi, they didn't dare touch the police, so they blamed everything on him. For over a decade, these villagers had bullied countless outsiders, almost never failing, let alone suffering such a great loss. As soon as the police left, the village chief summoned over a third of the villagers to deal with this matter. He completely disregarded the police's warning. He heard that it was chaotic outside now. Wouldn't the villagers be able to act even more brazenly in the future, with no one to control them? The village chief secretly calculated. In fact, if not for Lin Shi, this village would have become a small base for survivors in the apocalypse, with the village chief as its leader. The villagers had been brainwashed by him for years, united as one, responding to his every call. As long as they didn't directly confront the government, they could do whatever they wanted in this place. Someone, seeing that the door wouldn't budge, used a hoe on the wall. With a clang, only a small dent appeared. The hoe bounced off the wall, and the person wielding it dropped it due to the recoil, almost hitting the person behind them. "Village chief, this door is too sturdy. We can't break it down," Wang Liang said, frustrated. The village chief pondered, staring at Lin Shi's door. "Keep hitting it. I don't believe he'll stay inside forever." Wang Liang had no choice but to continue hitting the door with the other person. Just as the villagers thought Lin Shi would remain silently behind the closed door, the click of the lock echoed and the door opened. Lin Shi stepped out, looking at the dents on the door, his eyes cold. "What are you doing?" Finally, Lin Shi came out. The villagers had run out of patience. A middle-aged man, about 40 years old, without waiting for the village chief's order, stepped forward, pointed directly at Lin Shi's nose, and cursed. "What are we doing, you ask? Pay your debts a life for a life, you—" Before he could finish, Lin Shi saw the finger pointing at him, frowned, grabbed that finger and broke it. Crack, the crisp sound of the finger breaking, and a tragic scream rang out simultaneously. The middle-aged man's face turned pale. Lin Shi released his hand and delivered a kick to his stomach, sending him flying. The others quickly backed away. The middle-aged man lay on the ground, clutching his stomach in pain, unable to get up. Lin Shi looked at the dozen or so people. "If you want to talk, talk properly. I hate people pointing fingers in my face." The villagers were intimidated by Lin Shi's ruthlessness, but they weren't kind people. Their eyes quickly turned fierce again. The village chief stepped forward and said, "Young man, this time you were the one who struck first. Hitting someone means jail time." Lin Shi chuckled, finding it amusing. "No wonder there's a saying online. If you try to reason with them, they'll act like thugs. If you act like a thug with them, they'll try to reason with you." Seeing Lin Shi silent, the village chief thought he was scared. He looked around and said, "You're still young. If you have a criminal record, it will affect your entire career." The village chief pretended to be thinking for Lin Shi. Seeing Lin Shi didn't object, he continued, we can choose not to report it. As long as you compensate the village for the damages, this matter and Li Qiang's incident will be considered settled. What do you say? No, we must beat him to death. Beat him to death to avenge my son. He's the only son of my Lai family. Auntie Li, hearing the village chief, became agitated, crying and screaming. The village chief signaled to the person behind him, and someone immediately covered Auntie Li's mouth. So, have you thought about it? The village chief smiled, his eyes glancing at the house behind Lin Shi. He was much smarter than the other foolish villagers. It was chaotic outside now. No electricity, cars couldn't run, and it was snowing in June. If this situation continued to worsen, it might even become the apocalypse. He had to plan for himself. It must be said that the village chief, who could lead the entire village to prosperity, did have some brains. Lin Shi looked at the village chief with a faint smile. You want me to compensate you with money? The village chief's eyes gleamed with greed. He said with a smile, money is fine. That's fine. We don't need much. Just give us the house behind you, and that'll be enough. ATMs were broken now. Banks were in chaos. How could the village chief not know that money couldn't be withdrawn now? He wanted a place where he could live peacefully before the chaos erupted. Lin Shi's eyes grew colder. So, they were targeting his house. How greedy! He immediately turned cold and said, no. The smile on the village chief's face froze, his eyes revealing anger. Brat, you need to think carefully. This morning, if those 2 police officers hadn't intervened, Li Qiang would have chopped you to death. The implication was that Lin Shi was lucky to have escaped death this morning. The other villagers thought so too. They had strength in numbers. No matter how strong Lin Shi was, weren't all of them used to hard labor every day? There's a saying, even the most skilled martial artist fears a kitchen knife. This morning, they saw with their own eyes that Lin Shi was almost killed by Li Qiang. Don't you know? It's already chaotic outside. Even if a murder occurs, no one will investigate if the body is thrown out. I advise you to think carefully. Is your life more important, or are external possessions more important? The village chief narrowed his eyes. It was a blatant threat. The other villagers immediately raised the things in their hands, cooperating with the village chief to appear menacing. Lin Shi scoffed. These people thought they could bully him with their numbers, but they didn't know that if the military from Sha City hadn't arrived, Lin Shi would have killed them without mercy long ago. He didn't kill them, yet they insisted on dying, so he wouldn't hold back either. Old man, you want my stuff? Then come and get it. Say one more word of nonsense, and don't blame me for being ruthless. The village chief completely lost patience, his face furious. You want to die? I'll grant your wish. Wang Liang and the villager who had been breaking the door exchanged glances. One from the left, one from the right. They charged towards Lin Shi with their hoes. If a hoe hit someone, even if it didn't kill them instantly, broken bones and internal injuries were certain. In this situation, severe injury was even more terrifying than instant death. Auntie Li witnessed the scene, not struggling at all, a look of schadenfreude in her eyes. But before her smile could fully bloom, the situation reversed. As the two moved, Lin Shi moved too. He was faster. He grabbed the handle of Wang Liang's hoe, pulling both Wang Liang and the hoe back. Wang Liang was terrified. The hoe in his hand was forcefully pulled by Lin Shi and slammed into the other villager's hoe. That villager's hand bones broke. Lin Shi kicked him away. The hoe fell, hitting another villager on the head. That villager fell, his fate unclear. Several women in the village screamed in fear. The village chief retreated, commanding the other villagers. You few, go up together. Kill him. 5 designated villagers, wielding choppers and clubs, rushed forward. The 5 charged, putting all their strength into striking at Lin Shi. Lin Shi flung Wang Liang away, drew the knife from his back, his eyes sharp, ready to fight. His footsteps were light, his body flashed agilely, dodging the 5 men's attacks. The sharp knife slashed across the neck of the nearest one. Fresh blood splattered. Lin Shi had already spun around, appearing behind the 4 others. He stabbed one villager in the heart. 2 people fell instantly. Ordinary people only knew how to fight with brute force. They had no combat skills or experience. To Lin Shi, they were just mere chickens and dogs. If he had to use a crossbow to deal with ordinary people who had never experienced the apocalypse, then his 8 years of struggle in the apocalypse would have been for nothing. The 3 remaining villagers, seeing 2 people fall, were stunned in fear. They didn't even dare to raise the knives in their hands. This was the consequence of lacking combat experience. The fear of death was an instinct. Seeing their comrades die tragically, who wouldn't be terrified? But Lin Shi understood that no matter how fierce the battle, as long as one could still move, as long as one wasn't completely dead, one couldn't stop. Either fight or run. Stopping meant death. It meant death. Lin Shi easily slit the 3rd man's throat, then cut the 4th man's jugular. The last man finally reacted, turning to run. He ran, screaming, "Village chief, he's crazy, he's killing people." But before he could run a few steps, a knife pierced through his chest. Lin Shi pulled out the knife, glancing at the villagers standing frozen in the distance. Seeing Lin Shi's sharp offense, the village chief felt uneasy. He roared, "So what if he knows martial arts? Even a wild punch can kill a martial arts master. He only has 2 hands and 1 knife. Everyone, go up together." The other villagers looked at each other, then at the village chief, then at Lin Shi and the dripping knife. They had never seen human blood. Faced with such a terrifying scene, their instinctual fear still overcame their awe of the village chief. "Oh my God, he's killing people!" A villager threw down his farm tool and ran. Like a chain reaction, the other villagers also dropped their tools and fled in a panic. "Don't run!" the village chief roared. The villagers' terrified screams were almost completely drowned out. Dozens of people pushed and shoved each other, directly knocking the standing village chief to the ground. You all pushed me under the trampling feet." In just a few moments, the village chief was covered in footprints, unable to speak. After all the villagers had fled, the village chief was covered in footprints, looking as if he had been thoroughly humiliated. Lin Shi didn't pursue the chaotic crowd. His gaze remained fixed on the village chief. In peacetime, he could lead an entire village to defy the security forces. This village chief truly had great ambition. Such a person, if he survived the apocalypse and was given time, might very well lead the villagers to cause trouble in an entire region again. Lin Shi stepped forward, plunged a knife into the village chief's heart, then carried the body away. The village chief, stabbed in the heart, had a final flicker of life, opening his eyes to stare at Lin Shi, then unwillingly breathed his last. Even in death, he never imagined he would be killed by the very people he led. Lin Shi was about to throw the corpses down the mountain when he heard loud screams echoing from halfway down the slope. "Help! Don't come closer! Don't come closer!" A wild boar, 1.5 times larger than a normal wild boar, charged out from nowhere, ramming directly into the dozens of villagers on the mountain path. Many fell down the slope. Some hit their heads against the rock face, splattering fresh blood. Several corpses already lay scattered on the ground. There was only one path down the mountain. On flat ground, how could the villagers outrun a wild boar? Its sharp tusks claimed a life with each charge. Only after leaving over a dozen corpses on the spot did the wild boar stop attacking. It bit into the neck of a corpse and began to devour it ravenously. The fleeing villagers didn't dare to look back. Naturally, they didn't notice that this wild boar was different from any they had encountered before. Normal wild boars rarely intentionally harm people and don't eat human flesh. But this one had bright red eyes, its mouth full of human flesh, and its gaze even seemed to enjoy it, narrowing slightly. Lin Shi saw this scene, his eyes wide, pupils suddenly contracting. A mutated beast in his previous life, due to extreme conditions, plants died in large numbers, and countless herbivores died with them. Many animal species couldn't withstand the cold and survived, lacking food. They emerged from deep within the mountains and began to hunt humans. 3 years before the apocalypse, humanity had organized hunts. Despite many casualties, it also provided some food. At that time, survivors didn't consider these animals a threat. The government was also striving to restore science, technology, and human civilization. However, the reproduction rate of these animals, once in need of human protection, suddenly surged. Large numbers of animals began to attack humanity. By the 4th year of the apocalypse, the first beast tide appeared. Over time, human ammunition became scarcer. Although the government tried every means to restart production, the production rate still couldn't keep up with the consumption rate. Humanity's defenses began to crumble, and these carnivorous animals not only grew longer fur and larger bodies, but many even underwent mutations. The term mutated beast began to appear, used to refer to these mutated animals. Scientists found a substance in their blood and flesh that could accelerate animal evolution. By the 6th year of the apocalypse, ordinary bullets could no longer penetrate the thick skin, fur, and flesh of mutated beasts. It was at this point that humanity realized that in these circumstances, if they didn't change, they wouldn't be able to resist the mutated beasts. Lin Shi never expected that in this life, mutated beasts would appear right from the start. His expression shifted from surprise to seriousness. Is this the result of the treasure basin, accelerating the evolution of species? As if sensing Lin Shi's gaze, the wild boar stopped eating, but it looked towards Lin Shi. The mutated boar's bright red eyes stared at Lin Shi, seemingly able to pierce to the depths of his heart, instilling extreme fear. Lin Shi couldn't help but grip the knife in his hand. Mutated beasts not only had superior defense compared to normal animals, but their strength, speed, and intelligence were also far greater. In his previous life, he and Zhao Xiao had teamed up with a few others to kill a mutated beast. But afterward, due to issues with dividing the spoils, Zhao Xiao was almost killed on the spot by his own allies. From then on, he refused to hunt mutated beasts. As for Lin Shi, confronting a mutated beast alone at that time, he basically had no chance of winning, so he also gave up on hunting. Reborn into a new life, facing mutated beasts again, it was false to say he wasn't worried. But this time, Lin Shi was no longer the penniless man, with only a dagger like in his previous life. Concentrating his will, he thought for a moment, and the military knife in his hand disappeared into his spatial storage. Then, a dark object appeared in his hand. It was a hunting crossbow. Although handguns fired faster, their power was not comparable to a hunting crossbow. Moreover, the wild boar's skin was already thick. A crossbow could shatter an elephant's skull within 150 meters. Its power was truly astonishing. As the hunting crossbow appeared in Lin Shi's hand, the mutated boar seemed to sense danger and charged straight towards him. Lin Shi quickly loaded the crossbow. Just as Lin Shi aimed to shoot, the treasure basin interface, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly changed. Detected a Tier 1 primeval beast. Eliminate the primeval beast and absorb the primeval energy within its body. Primeval beast? Primeval energy? Lin Shi was slightly stunned. The mutated boar's speed was astonishing. In the blink of an eye that he was distracted, it had already halved the distance. Lin Shi could even smell its strong, foul odor. He immediately snapped back to reality, quickly aimed, and fired an arrow. But this arrow was too rushed. A miss by an inch is a miss by a mile. Originally, he intended to shoot at the weak point between the mutated boar's eyes, but it hit its nose, piercing through and exiting below its mouth. One arrow had sealed the mutated boar's mouth, but this kind of injury, in the short term, only angered the mutated boar. It didn't affect its mobility at all. The mutated boar let out a pained cry, its red eyes growing even redder, and charged towards Lin Shi at an even faster speed. There wasn't enough time to load another arrow. Lin Shi decisively put away the crossbow and dodged the mutated boar's charge. Facing a mutated beast like this boar, he couldn't let it hit him, or he would immediately lose his ability to fight. Its sharp tusks could easily pierce a person. At the same time, the powerful impact would shatter a person's internal organs. The mutated boar ran over 10 meters before stopping, turning around, and charging towards Lin Shi once again. Lin Shi quickly stood up, and the military knife reappeared in his hand. At this moment, the distance between him and the mutated boar was only about 10 meters. This distance was instantaneous for the mutated boar. The mutated boar charged like a blur. The distance between man and beast shortened. The mutated boar's massive body became even more prominent in his vision. Feeling the increasingly close breath of danger, Lin Shi's heartbeat involuntarily accelerated. His adrenaline surged, but his eyes became increasingly clear. As the mutated boar charged, he quickly twisted his body to dodge, while simultaneously swinging the military knife horizontally in front of him, slashing a line across the mutated boar's thick skin. A wound nearly half a meter long immediately appeared on the mutated boar's flank. Blood gushed out in a stream, but there was no joy on Lin Shi's face. He understood that the wound, which looked gruesome, was actually just a superficial cut on the skin, barely scratching the flesh. Compared to the mutated boar's colossal body, this wound was almost negligible. Conversely, the back of the military knife was now shattered due to the strong recoil. Blood splattered everywhere. If it were a normal wild boar, one such slash would have disemboweled it. The mutated beast's super-strong defense was truly terrifying. The mutated boar's pain only made it more furious. It immediately turned around, and the distance between man and beast shortened again. Lin Shi gripped the knife tightly, his palms drenched in sweat. The mutated boar was too fast. At such close range, dodging was almost impossible. He could only risk his life. Lin Shi's resolute eyes flashed. He didn't retreat, but charged straight towards the wild boar. The image of the wild boar grew larger and larger in his eyes. Its sharp tusks seemed about to pierce his face. The intense life-or-death crisis made Lin Shi's scalp tingle. His senses reached their peak. In the instant he was about to collide with the wild boar, Lin Shi felt something shatter within him. Before his eyes, the wild boar's speed suddenly slowed down. Everything around him slowed down as well. All the knowledge and combat experience he had learned suddenly flashed through Lin Shi's mind. His brain switched to a high-speed calculation state. Wind speed, force 4, northeast direction. Cement road slope, 27.6 degrees. Mutated boar's speed, 19.8 meters per second. My reaction speed, 13 meters per second. No more than 0.7 seconds until collision with the mutated boar. Death rate, 99.99%. Optimal evasion path. Optimal attack path. Optimal attack point. This information flashed through Lin Shi's mind in less than a second. Then, Lin Shi felt his body become like a sophisticated machine. Without needing to react or think, his brain had already chosen the best time and angle to dodge. With just a tiny gap, he avoided colliding with the mutated boar. His arm, like a precise robotic arm, at the most perfect moment, unleashed its full strength, plunging a knife into the mutated boar's neck. He immediately let go, avoiding being thrown back by the boar's strength. Stabbed in the neck, the mutated boar charged forward a few meters due to inertia, then turned around again. Such an attack still hadn't killed it, but its speed had slowed down significantly. The mutated boar staggered as it turned, preparing for one last, desperate charge. But as soon as it turned, it was met with a sharp arrow. The moment he let go of the military knife, the crossbow had already appeared in Lin Shi's hand. As if he had anticipated the wild boar's reaction, the arrow was fired the instant it turned. No precise aiming was needed. From the outside, it looked as if the wild boar itself had run into the arrow. The arrow's terrifying impact force instantly pierced through the mutated boar's skull. The mutated boar's body twitched twice. With a thud, it fell to the ground. A second later, Lin Shi's eyes brightened again. He looked at his hands, a strange look in his eyes. This was the feeling of gene decoding. No wonder even in the dark, misty rainforest, Number 2 could still pinpoint his location and actions through tiny, imperceptible sounds. In the moment of gene decoding, the brain could simply be compared to a computer. Unfortunately, it only lasted for 3 seconds. It could only be used at crucial moments, and the consequences would also follow. This thought had just flashed through Lin Shi's mind when, a second later, intense pain spread throughout his entire body. The aftermath of gene decoding appeared. A few minutes later, Lin Shi finally recovered. He didn't fall into a coma like Shu Qin did after first unlocking his gene lock. The intense pain lasted a little shorter than Shu Qin's. More importantly, he didn't feel the pain was unbearable. It still hurt, but definitely not to the point of wishing for death. Could it be that everyone's gene lock is different? Lin Shi thought to himself. He temporarily put that question aside. There was something more important now. He walked towards the dead mutated boar. This mutated beast must be the Tier 1 primeval beast that the treasure basin mentioned. So, how do I absorb primeval energy? Lin Shi squatted in front of the boar's corpse, lost in thought. Detected unowned primeval energy. Absorb? Yes, no. The treasure basin interface suddenly displayed text. Lin Shi was delighted. He said, "Yes, please maintain physical contact with the primeval beast. Note, the process of absorbing primeval energy must not be interrupted. If interrupted, the primeval energy will dissipate and cannot be reharvested." Interrupted means no more harvesting? Lin Shi hesitated for a moment, then put the boar's corpse into his spatial storage and headed back to the safe room. He didn't know how long this primeval energy absorption process would take. Although it was deserted now, to prevent accidents, returning to the safe room was still the best option. Lin Shi quickly returned to the safe room, patted Ma Wang's head, signaling it to wait obediently in the living room, then went alone into the utility room, which was originally intended for miscellaneous items. He took the mutated boar's corpse out of his spatial storage. The treasure basin interface reappeared with a prompt. Detected unowned primeval energy. Absorb? Yes, no. Lin Shi breathed a sigh of relief. He placed his hand on the boar's sticky fur, then said, "Yes." As soon as Lin Shi finished speaking, an invisible stream of primeval energy was drawn from the mutated boar's corpse, flowing into his body through his palm. Lin Shi felt his hand and entire arm, which were in contact with the boar, warm up slightly. This was followed by a refreshing sensation that spread throughout his body, from his cells to his very soul. 2 minutes later, that sensation stopped. After that, there was no other feeling. When he withdrew his hand, Lin Shi still felt unsatisfied. Is this the feeling of evolution? He smacked his lips. Lin Shi put the boar back into his spatial storage and went to wash his hands. Very quickly, he noticed he moved faster than before. Lin Shi tested his strength. It was also a little stronger than before. In short, his overall physical fitness increased by about 10%. He was certain that primeval energy was the key to rapid human evolution. Lin Shi recalled that when the apocalypse began, the treasure basin underwent a mutation. Solar storms peaked, geomagnetic storms were forming, primeval matter was rapidly being created, and primeval energy could help living beings evolve. That primeval matter was the key for living beings to absorb primeval energy and evolve. Harvesting primeval matter and forming primeval energy, that was the key to advancement. Scientists had discovered that animals and plants underwent mutations, while humans only felt colder. This proved that primeval matter could be passively absorbed by plants and animals, but not by humans. Humans had to actively absorb it. Therefore, in his previous life, there was the resonance cultivation technique. After 2 years of practicing resonance, Lin Shi clearly felt his physique change for the better. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to team up with others to kill a mutated beast. He remembered that since the apocalypse began, he hadn't cultivated the longevity cultivation technique. This was a good opportunity to test which was stronger, the longevity cultivation technique or resonance. No sooner said than done. Lin Shi immediately began cultivating the longevity cultivation technique in the living room. It was just as he predicted. After cultivating the longevity cultivation technique, his body felt significantly warmer, accompanied by a tingling sensation, similar to when he absorbed primeval energy. Lin Shi then tried resonance, but its effect was far inferior to the longevity cultivation technique at least. It was at least half as effective. A flash appeared in his palm. The longevity cultivation technique appeared. It was still the same old, tattered, dirty book. Longevity cultivation technique, resonance. If he ever met that shabby Taoist priest again, he would definitely have to find out where this longevity cultivation technique came from. Lin Shi put away the longevity cultivation technique. Now, ordinary people could unlock their gene locks and even mutated beasts were appearing. This was completely different from his previous life. The outside world would sooner or later become extremely dangerous. Lin Shi turned to look at Ma Wang, who was lying on the mat, intently watching him. He stroked its head and said, "Ma Wang, let's work hard together to get stronger. Woof, tonight, we'll eat mutated beast meat, okay?" Okay. That night, Lin Shi prepared the mutated wild boar. The colossal mutated wild boar carcass weighed at least over 400 pounds. It was huge. In his previous life, he had heard that mutated beast meat was very delicious, so he really wanted to try it. Lin Shi cut a large piece for Ma Wang, then sliced a few pieces of the wild boar meat for himself. To his surprise, the mutated wild boar meat wasn't tough like regular wild boar meat, nor did it have any gamey smell. The meat was tender and incredibly delicious. Lin Shi ate 8 pieces straight before stopping. Even Ma Wang ate more than 2 pieces, still licking its chops, not yet satisfied. Perhaps this was related to the primeval energy transforming the life essence of the primeval beast. After eating his fill, Lin Shi wanted to go out for a walk to aid digestion. Ma Wang also wanted to go along, but it had no fur. Lin Shi was afraid it would get cold, so he found an old shirt and modified it for Ma Wang to wear. Ma Wang seemed a little unaccustomed, but it still wore the shirt Lin Shi prepared. Outside, heavy snow was falling. In just a few hours, the bloodstains on the ground had completely disappeared. Looking down from the mountain, nearly half of the county town was plunged into darkness. Only a few scattered houses had faint lights, likely from candles. "Ma Wang, there won't be brightly lit homes anymore," Lin Shi murmured, looking at the dark landscape. He now understood the meaning of this apocalypse. Humanity had lived too long in comfort at the top of the food chain. This apocalypse was perhaps to force humanity and other living beings to compete again from scratch. Regarding why the previous 2 apocalypses occurred, he also had his conjectures. Humanity, accustomed to relying on external power, had forgotten to improve themselves. A few years before the apocalypse in his previous life, humanity still wanted to restore scientific and technological civilization. Lin Shi could imagine that after he died, decades into the apocalypse, animals and plants would have evolved far beyond humanity, and their reproduction rates would be many times faster. Humanity would fall behind, further and further behind, eventually perishing. As the only one who knew the truth, Lin Shi felt a heavy stone weighing on his heart. What should he do? Ma Wang looked up at Lin Shi, seemingly sensing his heavy burden and internal struggle, then rubbed against Lin Shi's leg. One man and one dog stood on the dark, snowy ground in silence. The next day, the apocalypse entered its 4th day. In the morning, Lin Shi practiced the longevity cultivation technique right in the living room. Knowing that practicing the longevity cultivation technique could make him stronger, he naturally wanted to spend more time cultivating. Last night, after returning to the safe room, Lin Shi also practiced the longevity cultivation technique for several hours until his limbs were so tired he couldn't lift them. Then he went to sleep. After one night, he had understood many things. He was just one person. He couldn't control the whole world. Even if he went to tell the government that this was the 3rd apocalypse and that humanity needed to strengthen itself from now on, never dreaming of restoring scientific and technological civilization again, the government wouldn't believe him. They might even arrest him, interrogate him about how he knew everything, or even kill him to seize the treasure basin. The best outcome would be for him to be controlled, becoming a tool for those in power. Lin Shi wasn't great enough to sacrifice himself for all humanity. Having the treasure basin, the longevity cultivation technique, and knowing the truth about this apocalypse, he was already ahead of everyone. What he had to do was to continuously get stronger. Only by getting stronger, strong enough that even the government had to be wary, would he have the equal right to speak with them. An ant cannot change the world, but a giant can. Furthermore, he also needed to consider whether this world was worth saving, and to what extent. After all, the worst outcome was just mutual destruction. Thinking of this, the faces of the Shen family members appeared in Lin Shi's mind. His eyes immediately became extremely cold. People like Shen Fanyin didn't deserve to survive. Ma Wang, who was watching Lin Shi practice, saw him suddenly reveal such a terrifying expression, startled, and instinctively lowered its head. After finishing his practice, Lin Shi rested for a while, made 2 burgers, boiled over 30 chicken eggs, and prepared 2 glasses of milk, sharing them equally with Ma Wang. From this, it could be seen that he and Ma Wang were quite compatible. Both man and dog ate a lot. After eating, he put the dismantled camera back into the peephole of the outer door. Outside, a blizzard was raging. The world was a blanket of white. The outdoor temperature had dropped to 30 degrees. The fleeing villagers no longer came to cause trouble. Last night, who knew how many people had died from freezing in their sleep? At this point, they were probably only concerned with their own survival. The government supplies that Li Wei mentioned were still nowhere to be seen. Lin Shi guessed that the temperature dropped too quickly, too suddenly. The government originally wanted to provide lighting supplies to appease the public, but they didn't expect that whether one saw light at night was no longer important. What people needed more was warmth and food. He wasn't coveting government supplies, but mainly wanted to see what the Sha city government was capable of. Returning to the safe room, Lin Shi changed Ma Wang's wound dressing. Ma Wang's wounds were healing very quickly. In just one day, there was no infection, and scabs had even begun to form. For safety, Lin Shi injected Ma Wang with another half-tube of anti-inflammatory medicine. After the injection, Ma Wang paced around the safe room, constantly looking towards the door. It seemed to have excess energy. "Wait until your wounds heal, then I'll take you outside," Lin Shi said helplessly. He thought for a moment, remembering that among the pet supplies he had collected earlier, there were a few toys. Perhaps he could take them out to entertain Ma Wang. "I'll find some toys for you to play with." Lin Shi used his mind to connect with his spatial storage. His consciousness swept through the vast space. Suddenly, he noticed a box. A box flashed into his hand. This was earlier. Shen Jinbin's bodyguard wanted to bring a briefcase into the hospital, and inside was a box. Lin Shi had traded that box for a shotgun at the time, then rushed back to the safe room. These past few days, he had completely forgotten about the box's existence. Only now did he remember it. Ma Wang saw Lin Shi holding a box in his hand, so it brought its furry head closer. "Sniff, sniff." "Not this one," Lin Shi said, stroking Ma Wang's head. He took out a ball from his other hand. He threw it to Ma Wang. "Play with this." But Ma Wang only looked at the ball for a moment, then turned its head to stare intently at the box in Lin Shi's hand. The more it looked, the more interested it became. Lin Shi had no choice but to say, "All right, let's take a look together, but I don't know what's inside either. You be careful and keep your distance, okay?" Ma Wang obediently sat down on the sofa next to Lin Shi. Lin Shi carefully opened the box. Inside were 6 neatly arranged blue pills. They looked exactly like the blue pills he had gotten from number 2, only differing in shape, and these were slightly larger. Ma Wang had approached without him noticing, sniffing these blue pills. These pills were originally given by the bodyguard to Shen Jinbin to save his life. "What exactly is this?" Lin Shi picked up a pill. As soon as he touched the pill, the treasure basin suddenly displayed a prompt. Detected a small amount of primeval matter. Absorb? Yes, no. Lin Shi was startled. These pills contained primeval matter? What did primeval matter represent now? He knew too well. Shen Fanyin was actually able to extract this kind of substance before the apocalypse. Lin Shi's face grew serious. He said directly, "Yes, absorb." A second later, a faint warm current flowed from his finger, which was touching the pill, into Lin Shi's body. Lin Shi only felt his arm warm up slightly. Then there was no other reaction. He tried to sense it. The feeling of absorbing this pill was similar to absorbing primeval energy before, but the effect was less than 1,000th of the primeval energy. As for the pill number 2 left behind, the amount of origin matter in it was pitifully low. Lin Shi held it in his hand, but the treasure basin didn't give any prompts. This made Lin Shi breathe a sigh of relief. If these pills contained a lot of origin matter, he would have to reconsider his revenge against the Shen family. Before dying, number 2 mentioned that Shen Fanren was cultivating this substance in a lab environment. If these pills were rich in origin matter, it would mean Shen Fanren had likely succeeded. But looking at it now, he definitely hadn't. Moreover, these pills must be incredibly precious to Shen Fanren. Otherwise, he wouldn't have only taken out 6 when his son was on the verge of death. Turning his head, he saw Demon King sniffing the pill with a greedy look. Lin Shi asked, "Want to eat it?" Demon King barked. Origin matter was beneficial to both humans and animals, but this tiny amount was worth less to Lin Shi than a single session of cultivating the vitality art. Without any hesitation, Lin Shi tossed the pill into Demon King's mouth. Demon King swallowed it and licked its lips. Seeing no abnormal reaction from the dog, Lin Shi fed it the remaining 5 pills as well. It was just a casual gesture at first, but to his surprise, it brought a pleasant shock the next day. When Lin Shi woke up the following morning, the treasure basin suddenly prompted, "Level 1 Origin Beast, detected within range." That alert made Lin Shi jolt up from his bed. "Within 2 meters? Isn't that right inside my room? What kind of origin beast could breach his shelter's defenses and enter his room directly?" Lin Shi instantly felt goosebumps all over his body. He checked carefully. There was only him and Demon King lying on the rug. There were no other living creatures. Demon King was also woken up by Lin Shi's movements. 1 man and 1 dog stared at each other. Seeing Lin Shi awake, Demon King took the initiative to approach, wagging its tail and rubbing affectionately against him. After a long while, Lin Shi finally confirmed that the level 1 origin beast the treasure basin mentioned was none other than Demon King. He couldn't help but be amazed. Observing closely, Demon King's outward appearance hadn't changed much, except that its severe wounds had completely scabbed over overnight. Even the wounds he had stitched up earlier were almost fully healed. With this recovery speed, as long as they were careful, it would be fully healed in a few days. What powerful regenerative abilities after the shock came immense joy. "I actually managed to befriend an origin beast," Lin Shi rarely smiled so brightly, flashing his white teeth. He looked at Demon King again. The dog's heterochromatic eyes seemed more expressive now. The blue was clearer, and the red was even more eerie. When animals mutate into origin beasts, their intelligence also increases. Lin Shi held up 2 fingers and asked, "How many is this?" "Woof, woof, and this? Woof, woof, woof. This plus this equals what? Woof, 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 woof." After testing it, Lin Shi determined that Demon King's intelligence was at least on par with a 10-year-old child. Perhaps with some teaching, it would get even smarter. Lin Shi carefully untied Demon King's leash. He guessed that Demon King had already absorbed a fair amount of origin matter before, reaching the threshold of evolution. So, after eating the pills he gave it, it evolved immediately. Once fully untied, Demon King licked Lin Shi. "Good boy." Lin Shi patted its head. Just like before, hearing Lin Shi's praise made Demon King wag its tail frantically. Becoming an origin beast hadn't affected its personality at all. After observing it for the rest of the day, Lin Shi became even more certain of this. He firmly believed that Demon King would be his most capable assistant. Summoning the treasure basin, he saw that 3 days later, a blizzard would show this city, which had never seen snow, what a true frozen hell looked like. The outdoor temperature had already dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. At night, it was even colder, plummeting to -50. In his previous life, Lin Shi had never been to Sha City, but he clearly remembered that in Hei City, the temperature on the 4th day was -50 degrees, dropping to a low of -80 at night. Right now in the north, the outdoor temperature must have dropped to -70 or even -90 degrees, right? If Lin Shi were in High City in this life, he would see that the daytime temperature there had already hit -60 degrees and -80 or even -90 at night. As for the north, if someone walked through with a thermometer, they would find survivors incredibly scarce, just a scattered few. Near the northernmost cities, there were absolutely no signs of life left. This ice apocalypse was even harsher than the last one. Over the past few days, Lin Shi stayed in his safe house, playing and relaxing with Demon King every day while practicing the vitality art. It was -30 degrees outside, but inside Lin Shi's room, the heater kept it a cozy 20+ degrees. Other survivors were piling all their clothes, curtains, and bedsheets on themselves, and still couldn't withstand the bone-chilling cold. Meanwhile, Lin Shi was in his safe house, wearing only a t-shirt and shorts, sweating profusely from practicing the vitality art, and even having to drink a glass of cold fruit juice to cool down. The relentless blizzard made those who once took pride in living in high-rise apartments regret it bitterly. After the blizzard's baptism, their glass windows and floor-to-ceiling panes were completely shattered. Freezing winds howled into their homes from every corner, turning the rooms into a chaotic mess. Not only was the power out, but the water pipes had frozen solid. Lacking running water, survivors had no choice but to use wash basins and buckets to scoop up snow and melt it for daily use. After many plastic buckets froze and cracked, they finally remembered to dig out the stainless steel wash basins from the bottom of their cabinets. When the gas ran out, those without portable stoves were left eating raw food and waiting for rescue. As for Lin Shi, because he had sealed his well and routed the water pipes at least 6 meters underground into the safe house, they hadn't frozen and were still perfectly usable. Even if the well water did freeze, he had installed a stainless steel water tank beneath the room during construction, so his water supply wouldn't be affected at all. Every day, Lin Shi comfortably grilled meat, enjoyed hot pot, and cooked fish. In his free time, he watched downloaded movies or taught Demon King the 9-year compulsory education curriculum. Aside from not being able to go out and play, and occasionally having to shovel snow, his life was completely different from the pre-apocalyptic world. The villagers at the foot of the mountain, however, were suffering immensely. Ever since Lin Shi escaped, and the mutated wild boar killed over a dozen people, the villagers who hadn't gone up the mountain were completely unaware that in just 2 or 3 hours, nearly half of those who went had died. Hearing what happened on the mountain, and losing the village chief, their core leader, the villagers fell into chaos. Some cried tragically, some wanted to call the police, and some grabbed weapons, ready to risk their lives going up the mountain. It was a total uproar, and then, the blizzard struck. Even though it was a mountain village, the residents who had lived in Sha City for decades had zero experience dealing with such extreme cold. The self-built houses in the village lacked thick insulation. On the first night, most of the glass windows in the village shattered due to the sudden temperature drop and the raging blizzard. Fortunately, every household in Wolong village usually stocked up on some wood, so they managed to board up their windows that night and barely survived. But after just one night, a third of the village had fallen ill with fevers. Even with the windows boarded up, the wind still seeped in. Most villagers had to move their beds to windowless rooms or the first-floor halls, but they were luckier than the city folks. Most village homes used gas cylinders. Many still cooked with firewood stoves, and every household had a habit of stocking up on candles and flashlights. Cooking and lighting weren't an issue, but the blizzard raged on for days without end. Many of the sick and frail couldn't hold on, and quite a few elderly villagers quietly passed away amidst the howling winds. Early that morning, those who were still awake realized that the days-long blizzard had finally stopped. Even the sun, after being hidden for so long, reappeared. Sunlight bathed the earth once more. The survivors were ecstatic, thinking this nightmare was finally coming to an end. But very quickly, they realized the sunlight was no longer as warm as before. Even standing directly in the sun, they barely felt any warmth. Those on the first floor without awnings quickly discovered that they couldn't open their doors. The endless blizzard had buried all of Sha City under a layer of snow over a meter thick. Those with windows could climb out to shovel the snow. Those without had to find a way down from the second floor. However, this wasn't a problem for Lin Shi. When designing the safe house, he had learned from his past life and made the door open inward. No matter how thick the snow was outside, the door could still be opened. He just needed to shovel the snow regularly to avoid being buried. At this moment, the safe house door opened, and Lin Shi stepped out with Demon King. Demon King's wounds were completely healed. The previously bloody gashes were now just smooth, pale scars. Fur had already started growing back on the shaved spots. In just a few days, a layer of fuzz had appeared. But to withstand the outside temperature, it had to wear an old set of clothes that Lin Shi had altered for it. As for Lin Shi, he wore a waterproof insulated jacket. Underneath, he had on thermal underwear and a thick turtleneck sweater. His boots were anti-slip snow boots, paired with waterproof thermal gloves, a hat, a windproof mask, and ski goggles to prevent snow blindness from the reflected sunlight. He was fully geared up. Lin Shi took a set of ski equipment out of his spatial dimension and strapped on his skis. Once ready, he told the eager Demon King beside him, "Let's go. Don't run too fast, and watch where you're going." Hearing the words, "Let's go," Demon King instantly bolted like a wild horse slipping its reins, dashing wildly through the snow. Lin Shi smiled helplessly and chased after it. One man and one dog quickly made their way down the mountain. Once at the bottom, Lin Shi stored his skis away and walked slowly toward the city with Demon King. On the road, many people bundled up in thick, bulky clothes were coming out of their homes. At a glance, it was obvious they were wearing every piece of clothing they owned. Compared to them, Lin Shi was dressed rather lightly, but it was clear who was actually warmer. You could tell just by looking at their purple lips and hands red from the cold. A young man saw Lin Shi's gear and called out enviously, Hey, you with the dog. Seeing that Lin Shi seemed not to hear him, he ran over quickly, slipped and fell in the snow, but immediately scrambled up and kept running toward Lin Shi. Lin Shi didn't stop and turn around until the guy caught up to him. He looked coldly at the young man whose face was flushed from the freezing wind. My name's Qian Liangliang. What's your name, bro? Qian Liangliang brushed the snow off his clothes. He looked up at Lin Shi. Lin Shi said flatly, if you have something to say, spit it out. Qian Liangliang stared at Lin Shi's gear, unable to hide the greed in his eyes. I just wanted to ask where you bought this outfit. I want to get one too. A store downtown, Lin Shi replied curtly and kept walking. Wait, bro, Qian Liangliang chased after him. He asked as he walked. How much was a set? Do you have an extra one? Can I borrow one for now? Lin Shi frowned, giving Qian Liangliang a weird look. Go buy it yourself. Stop following me, or I won't hold back. Demon King also stopped, glaring fiercely at Qian Liangliang and letting out a threatening growl. Qian Liangliang looked at Demon King in terror. It was bigger than any dog he had ever seen. All right, take care, boss. As Lin Shi walked away, Qian Liangliang stared at his back and spat on the ground. Pfft. What's so great about that son of a bitch? Just then, a middle-aged man in a down jacket walked past Qian Liangliang. Qian Liangliang hurriedly approached him. Hey boss, that outfit you're wearing a few days ago when he went out, some stores were still trying to do business despite the power outage. Now, there was absolutely nothing left. After days of nightmarish terror, people finally realized that if they didn't actively scavenge for food and winter supplies, they wouldn't survive. On the streets, many people were wielding all sorts of tools and weapons, smashing into stores. Groups of people swarmed grocery stores, fighting over food. Some outright robbed others of their belongings. There were even people killing each other right in the middle of the street. Social order had completely collapsed. Lin Shi led Demon King to the front of a jewelry store. His goal for this trip was to collect gold to upgrade the treasure basin, which hadn't been upgraded in a long time. The treasure basin's origins were mysterious and unfathomable. It could predict the apocalypse, and it knew about origin power and mutant forms, terms no one had ever heard of in his previous life. It was so mysterious, it seemed omniscient. It could duplicate and store items, a function completely unheard of. It could even bring people back to life. Perhaps when he upgraded the treasure basin to a certain level, he would discover even more pleasant surprises. Therefore, Lin Shi never forgot his intention to upgrade it. He signaled Demon King to step back, then took out a prepared hammer and smashed it hard against the jewelry store's tempered glass door. With Lin Shi's current strength, a single hammer strike shattered the tempered glass into countless tiny pieces. A few strikes later, the entire glass pane crashed down with a loud bang, scattering shards everywhere. Inside the store, it was dead silent. There were no ear-piercing alarms, no terrified screams from staff. Leaving Demon King to stand guard outside, Lin Shi walked straight in, pried open every display case, and swept up all the gold, platinum, and diamonds. As long as it was valuable, he stuffed it into his backpack, then transferred the majority of the gold into his spatial dimension. The entire process took less than half an hour. He didn't use his spatial dimension to directly absorb the gold from the cases, because if latecomers saw intact display cases with the gold vanished without a trace, it would increase the risk of exposing his treasure basin. After clearing out one store, he led Demon King to the next. Before the apocalypse, Lin Shi had strolled around downtown and knew there were many jewelry stores here. Just like that, he continuously swept through 8 jewelry stores, 3 of which were massive. The gold, silver, and jewels he collected were worth at least over 100 million before the apocalypse. Downtown had many stores, and there was no shortage of looters. Some saw Lin Shi smashing into jewelry stores and sweeping up the valuables and wanted to swoop in for a share, but they were all scared off by Demon King guarding the door. Others saw Lin Shi taking gold and silver, things you couldn't eat or wear, and secretly mocked him for being an idiot. At noon, Lin Shi and Demon King had lunch inside one of the jewelry stores he had just cleaned out. Using his backpack as cover, he took out some pre-made beef patties from his spatial dimension and shared them. Even though there was no one else in the store, he still had to be careful. The lessons from his past life had taught him to never let his guard down. Man and dog were eating happily when a flurry of footsteps echoed from the store entrance. A middle-aged couple, an older teenage girl, and a boy around 10 years old walked past the door. Catching Lin Shi's eye, the 2 adults and the girl were all carrying large backpacks. Only the boy was empty-handed. It looked like a family of 4 out scavenging for supplies. When the 4 of them reached the storefront, they peered inside through the wide-open door, seemingly intending to come in and take a look. Lin Shi spoke up to warn them. This place is taken. If you want to rest, go somewhere else. Hearing Lin Shi, the couple was about to leave, but the boy stopped. Is this your house? I'll go in if I want to. The boy scowled, looking as if the whole world owed him $5 million. His tone was incredibly bratty. He kicked a shard of glass and was about to step inside. The girl quickly pulled him back. Agoo! Don't cause trouble. But those words seemed to strike a nerve with the boy. He slapped her hand away, cursing as he marched into the store. I'm going in. You think a wretched girl like you can boss me around? This isn't his house. So what if I go in? The boy named Agoo walked right up to Lin Shi. It wasn't until he saw the fierce dog that he took a few steps back. But seeing the beef patty in the dog's mouth and the one in Lin Shi's hand, Agoo stopped in his tracks, staring intently at the meat. At this moment, the other three also walked in. The couple originally intended to call Agoo out, but upon seeing the beef patties, they couldn't tear their eyes away. Even though the power and gas had only been out for a few days, for people used to eating hot, cooked meals and craving meat, these past few days had been pure torture. Kid, feeding something this good to a dog is such a waste. The middle-aged woman looked regretfully at the beef patty in the fierce dog's mouth, unable to hold back her comment. Hearing this, the fierce dog instantly got angry. It raised its head, glaring viciously at the woman, looking as if it would eat her alive if she said another word. The woman quickly shut her mouth and hid behind her husband. The middle-aged man gulped as he stared at the beef patty, then looked at Lin Shi and said, Kid, a dog this big needs to be leashed when you take it out. What if it bites someone? You should tie it up. If you're afraid of getting bitten, then leave. You're interrupting our meal, Lin Shi replied dismissively. The middle-aged man choked on his words, looking displeased. But after glancing at the fierce dog, he ultimately kept his mouth shut. Just then, Agoo spoke up. Mom, I want to eat a beef patty. The woman looked awkwardly at Lin Shi, pulling the boy's hand. Mom will make you one when we get home. Let's go. We don't have any meat at home. We don't even have a hot rice cooker. I want a beef patty. I want to eat it right now. The boy tugged at the woman's clothes and stomped his feet hard. If I don't get a beef patty, I'm not leaving. Annoyed by the brat, Lin Shi shot him a glance, a murderous glint flashing in his eyes. The boy instantly fell silent in fear. Hey kid, how about we trade these things for 4? No, 3. 3 beef patties, okay? The teenage girl in the group was also staring intently at the meat. Lin Shi glanced down and rejected them without hesitation. No. The woman's bag was full of summer items like clothes, curtains, and thin blankets. Nothing of use to him. 2 pieces is fine too, or even just 1. Please help me out. My son hasn't had meat in days. He's gotten so skinny. Demon King swallowed its food whole, tilting its head, seemingly wondering why this woman was spouting such nonsense. Seeing that Lin Shi refused to trade, the middle-aged man said angrily, You'd rather feed a dog than trade with us. Stop making a fool of yourself here. Let's go. The middle-aged woman sighed helplessly, pulling her son along as the whole family left. Lin Shi ignored them and continued his lunch, casually tossing another beef patty into Demon King's mouth. It had already finished 1 piece, but Demon King didn't eat this one. Instead, it suddenly raised its head and looked outside. Lin Shi followed Demon King's gaze toward the street. Right at that moment, the boy named Agoo suddenly broke free from the middle-aged woman's grip and lunged forward to snatch the meat patty Lin Shi was about to give Demon King. Give it to me. Lin Shi noticed the boy lunging for the meat patty, his aura flaring up. At the exact same time, Demon King's aura shifted in a split second. It lunged right at the boy and bit down hard on his arm. 2 agonizing screams rang out simultaneously, one from the boy and the other from the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman rushed over and hugged the boy. The boy passed out from the pain as she shrieked her son's name. Demon King spat the bloody arm out of its mouth, as if spitting out something filthy. By now, chaotic noises were echoing from outside. Lin Shi was about to go out and check. Stop right there! The middle-aged man glared furiously at Lin Shi. Your dog bit off my son's arm. You think you can just walk away? Lin Shi didn't even bother turning around. He lunged to snatch the food himself. He's lucky he wasn't bitten to death. He patted Demon King's head and said, Next time you meet someone like this trying to snatch your food, just bite them to death. Demon King nodded obediently, turning back to look at the boy, seemingly pondering whether it should go over and finish the job right now. Do you have any humanity left? Feeding a dog is one thing, but treating human life like trash? The middle-aged man roared, but he didn't dare step forward to avenge his son. At this moment, outside the door, agonizing screams and chaotic footsteps on the street grew much clearer. Help me! A crowd of people was fleeing in panic down the street. Behind them, a massive black cat, the size of a wildcat, a mutated dragonlet, was chasing them frantically. This cat was incredibly fast, its eyes vicious. It had clearly lost the gentle, docile look of a normal cat. Every time its razor-sharp claws caught someone, they would pierce right through their body, tearing off a chunk of flesh. It toyed with its prey, pouncing on them and shredding them with its claws until they were a bloody mess before lunging at the next person. It seemed to treat humans like mice beneath its paws. After toying one person to death, it leaped into the air. With superhuman jumping power, it landed right in front of the fleeing crowd, looking at the despairing humans with a sense of amusement. When the cat got within 100 meters of the store, the treasure basin's interface popped up before Lin Shi's eyes. Level 1 Origin Beast, detected within 100 meters. Another Origin Beast encountering another Origin Beast made Lin Shi tremble slightly. Last time, because the treasure basin's prompt appeared so suddenly, he was caught off guard and accidentally killed that mutated wild boar. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistake. Right then, Demon King, standing beside him, suddenly erupted with intense battle intent, glaring hostilely at the mutated dragon Lai Cat. Demon King took a few steps forward, then turned its head to look at Lin Shi, seemingly asking for permission with its eyes. "You want to take on that cat?" Lin Shi instantly understood Demon King's intention. Demon King nodded. Seeing an origin beast, of course they had to kill it. This was a chance to rapidly boost their strength, and Lin Shi certainly wouldn't pass it up. Demon King volunteering for battle surprised him a bit, but this would also allow him to gauge Demon King's strength. After all, it didn't matter whose hands the origin beast died by. He asked, "Need a hand?" Demon King gently nudged Lin Shi with its head, pushing him back a step, signaling him not to intervene. "Go ahead, I'm right here to back you up. I definitely won't let anything happen to you." Demon King looked at Lin Shi with gratitude, then slowly advanced toward the cat. At the same time, the mutated dragon Lai Cat seemed to sense something and turned its head toward Demon King. Seeing the dog, the cat immediately abandoned the crowd, locking its focus entirely on the approaching Demon King. It arched its back in a clear warning and let out a sharp hiss. Meow! Demon King accelerated and charged. Both were origin beasts. Demon King was slightly larger in size, but the Dragon Lee Cat possessed terrifying speed. The battle between cat and dog was incredibly fierce. As Lan Shi intently watched the fight outside, back inside the jewelry store, the family of three broke into an argument again. "Hubby, hurry. We need to go to the hospital." The middle-aged woman used clothes to cover the boy's wound, carefully binding his severed arm. "Do you have any idea what the hospitals are like right now? Where are we going to find a doctor?" Hospitals have been the deadliest places these past few days, and there's a giant cat outside. How are we supposed to leave? Over the past few days, hospitals had become one of the most chaotic places in the city. 2 days ago, countless people suffering from frostbite, severe colds, and high fevers had crammed into the hospitals. Then the blizzard trapped everyone inside. The hospitals were packed to the brim, but no hospital had enough supplies to accommodate that many people. What would starving, freezing people do when pushed to the brink of life and death? Anyone could guess. Right now, hospitals were literal hells on earth. Then what do we do? Are we just going to watch a goo die here? The middle-aged woman was frantic. "Tie a tourniquet above a goo's wound. First it'll slow the bleeding." The teenage girl standing nearby, who had been silent all along, suddenly spoke up. Hearing her daughter's words, the middle-aged woman, who had just been weeping for her son, instantly changed her expression. Her voice turned sharp. "What do you know, you wretched girl? Are you trying to cripple your brother?" The girl cowered, her voice trembling. "I saw it online. If he bleeds this much, he'll die." Her words were like pouring oil on a fire. The middle-aged man stormed over and slapped her hard across the face. He vented all the anger he couldn't unleash on Lin Shi onto his daughter. "You want to watch your brother die, don't you? Raising a useless thing like you is a curse. Why didn't you hold a goo back from coming in? Why didn't you help your brother grab that meat earlier? Why wasn't it you who got bitten?" The girl was shoved to the ground, sharp glass shards piercing the palms of her hands. The middle-aged couple acted as if they didn't see it. The woman continued her vicious scolding. "If anything happens to your brother, don't even think about living a good life." The girl stood up numbly. Without a word, she picked the glass shards out of her palms one by one. Fresh blood oozed out. An unfathomably dark look flashed in her eyes. The battle between the origin beasts was incredibly brutal. In just a few short minutes, both cat and dog were covered in injuries. The people who had been chased by the Dragon Lee Cat earlier took advantage of the beast's sprawl to escape. By now, the Dragon Lee Cat was limping. Its right hind leg had been bitten and injured by Demon King at some point. As for Demon King, it had suffered 3 deep, bleeding gashes from the Dragon Lie Cat and had nearly lost an eye. Its thigh was also clawed with several deep wounds, exposing the bone. Lin Shi felt a surge of anxiety. If Demon King's life was in danger, he would immediately use ranged weapons. Demon King lunged fiercely, but the Dragon Lie Cat dodged it again. The cat quickly spun around and pounced on Demon King. Its razor-sharp claws glinted coldly in the sunlight. Demon King's fur coat was shredded, tufts of fur flying everywhere. Right at that moment, Lin Shi moved slightly, a murderous intent flashing in his eyes. A handgun quietly slipped into his hand from his sleeve. Suddenly, a terrified scream from the teenage girl rang out behind him. "Run, they're trying to kill you!" It turned out the middle-aged couple had quietly flanked Lin Shi from behind. They each held a knife, their eyes brimming with murderous intent and madness. Their intentions were obvious without a word. Serves you right for not knowing what's good for you. Seeing that Lin Shi had spotted them, the middle-aged man shot the girl a vicious glare. Since they were exposed, he stopped hiding it. He spoke to Lin Shi in a low, menacing voice. "Your dog isn't here now, kid. You killed my son. I'm going to chop you up and feed your bones to the dogs. Stop talking and just kill him. You can wear his clothes. I want that beef patty," the middle-aged woman urged impatiently. In truth, they had set their sights on Lin Shi early on. At first, they had their eyes on his dog, but they didn't expect Demon King to be so ferocious. Seeing that the dog was too tough to handle, they planned to slip away first, wait until dark to ambush him, use the girl to lure the dog away, and then strike. They never expected their son to get into an accident first while they weren't paying attention. But striking now worked just fine. "Take advantage of the dog's absence and kill this kid." Seeing Lin Shi being threatened, Demon King roared in fury. With a powerful swat, it knocked the dragon cat to the ground, then viciously bit into its injured leg again. This bite decided the victor. The dragon cat's right leg was bitten clean off, and it let out a blood-curdling screech. Demon King seized the opportunity and pounced on the cat. Its overwhelming strength finally came into play. Its sharp claws pinned down the struggling dragon cat as it tried to get up. The cat thrashed wildly, clawing at Demon King's thigh, but a second later, Demon King snapped its neck with a heavy stomp. As for Lin Shi, an unexpected situation unfolded. Just as the middle-aged couple raised their knives and charged, the initially trembling girl suddenly pulled out a meat cleaver from nowhere and hacked at them. No one expected such a sudden twist. The girl, whom no one paid attention to, who was always cowering and barely dared to speak, struck with such ruthless brutality. Though small and skinny, the girl possessed immense strength. Her first strike nearly severed the middle-aged man's neck. Immediately after, before the middle-aged woman could even react, she was hacked to the ground by the girl. Even Lin Shi had never seen a scene like this, a look of surprise crossing his face. After killing the dragon cat, Demon King immediately ran back to Lin Shi's side. Lin Shi patted its head to calm it down. He pulled a first aid kit from his backpack, treating Demon King's wounds with one hand, while observing the situation with the other. On the other side, the middle-aged man's carotid artery was severed. He rapidly lost a massive amount of blood, his body convulsing before his eyes rolled back. The middle-aged woman was still struggling, thrusting her paring knife at the girl. The girl dodged, getting stabbed in the arm, but she didn't stop. She brought the cleaver down hard onto the woman's head. Even after the woman stopped moving, she kept hacking relentlessly. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. It looked as if the things under her blade weren't her parents, but just two slabs of pork. She didn't stop until both corpses were a mangled, bloody mess. Gripping the cleaver, she stood up like a demon from hell, walked over to the unconscious boy and whispered, "Go to hell together." With that, she brought the blade down on the boy's head. Having finished it all, the girl walked toward Lin Shi with the cleaver. But halfway there, she dropped the knife to the ground. Looking completely soulless, she stared at Lin Shi and said, "Kill me. Why would I kill you?" Lin Shi didn't understand. He only killed to protect himself and his interests. This girl hadn't attacked him, hadn't offended him, and had even warned him earlier. Even though he had already sensed the murderous intent behind him at the time, he clearly saw that the girl harbored no hostility toward him. She had even helped him solve a problem. He had no reason to kill her. The light had vanished from the girl's eyes. "I killed my parents and my family. I'm such a terrible person. Shouldn't I be killed?" Lin Shi found it amusing. "What does you killing your family have to do with me? Besides, a lot of people don't deserve to be parents." At that moment, Lin Shi thought of Lu Xiue, his eyes darkening. He patted Demon King and said, "Let's go." When Lin Shi and Demon King returned to the dragon cat's body, the people who had fled earlier had come back. But they only dared to watch from a distance, not daring to approach. The dragon cat was dead, but Demon King, who killed it, was perfectly fine. Lin Shi ignored the surrounding gazes and told Demon King to drag the cat's carcass away. Those who thought Lin Shi wouldn't take the cat's body were instantly disappointed. They had hoped to scavenge some meat. However, the severed leg that Demon King had bitten off still sparked a frantic scramble among the crowd. Meat was meat, no matter what kind it was. After walking for a bit, Lin Shi stopped and looked toward an alley behind him. A blood-soaked girl, clutching a large bag, cautiously stepped out of the alley. It was the girl who had just slaughtered her entire family. "Why are you following me?" Lin Shi frowned. The girl took a few steps closer, only stopping when she heard Demon King's threatening growl. Can I follow you? No, Lin Shi rejected her without hesitation. Just because he didn't kill her didn't mean he was going to take her in. I can do a lot of things. Don't let my skinny look fool you. I'm really strong. I can endure hardship, and I don't eat much. The girl tried desperately to sell herself. I already have a partner. Lin Shi looked at her with a cold, piercing gaze. He warned her, "Stop following me. I won't show mercy if I have to strike." He wasn't going to make friends with anyone anymore. He wouldn't even feel safe keeping a servant around. My name is Qin Shuang, the girl shouted at Lin Shi's retreating back. Seeing that Lin Shi didn't turn around, Qin Shuang's eyes grew resolute, and she walked off in another direction. Once he felt the gaze behind him fade away, Lin Shi found a secluded, deserted spot and stored the Dragon Li cat's carcass into his spatial dimension. In the afternoon, Lin Shi took out his marked map and continued sweeping through jewelry stores. After clearing out over a dozen stores, he ran into an unexpected person at the entrance of one of them. You're following me? A murderous glint flashed in Lin Shi's eyes as he looked at Qin Shuang, who had appeared before him. Qin Shuang quickly explained, I'm not following you. I came to this jewelry store to only then did Lin Shi notice that Qin Shuang was holding a small hatchet. So she was also here for gold. Lin Shi frowned. Having run into this girl twice in one day, he instinctively assumed she wanted to cling to him. Lin Shi sidestepped Qin Shuang to leave, but she called out to him. Wait! Lin Shi turned around, looking at her impatiently. Qin Shuang dropped the large sack she was carrying. It was obvious that after an entire afternoon, the sack had deflated significantly. She opened the sack, revealing a messy pile of items inside. Gold and jewelry. Qin Shuang's eyes lit up as she picked up a gold bar and held it out to Lin Shi. These are for you. Lin Shi's impatient gaze shifted slightly. Give them to me? Don't you need gold? I searched 4 jewelry stores this afternoon. All the gold I found is right here. Lin Shi said coldly, If I need something, I'll get it myself. Even if you waste your time finding these things, I won't take you in. I know. Qin Shuang let go of the bag of gold and jewelry in her hands, lowered her head and said, I know what kind of person I am. I can only rely on myself. I just wanted to thank you for not pushing me away when I was at my most desperate. No need to thank me. I didn't do anything, Lin Shi said truthfully. Qin Shuang looked at him steadfastly. To me, you did. This gold is useless to me. You should keep it. Lin Shi needed the gold, but he didn't want to owe anyone a favor. If you insist on giving it to me, I'll trade you for it. Lin Shi took out some anti-inflammatory drugs, a bottle of rubbing alcohol, and a roll of gauze from his backpack. All this gold for a little bit of medicine? If this were before the apocalypse, people would have thought Lin Shi was insane. But now, with all the pharmacies and hospitals looted, medicine was far more precious than gold. Qin Shuang's hand had been stabbed by the middle-aged woman. If left untreated, the wound could easily get infected. In these conditions, that could be a death sentence. This medicine was priceless to her. As for Lin Shi, trading a bit of medicine for 30 or 40 caddies of gold was a huge profit for him. Plus, he earned the girl's gratitude. A glint flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. He realized this girl was anything but simple. A young woman who could carry so much gold, a full sack of supplies, and a fire axe that weighed several pounds. That kind of strength couldn't be dismissed as just being strong. Furthermore, Lin Shi had seen her arm get stabbed by the middle-aged woman, yet she had calmly collected supplies as if nothing had happened. He glanced down at the Demon King's wound. It had stopped bleeding. After a moment's thought, Lin Shi took out a few packs of instant noodles he'd collected from the shipping container and handed them to Qin Shuang along with the medicine. Qin Shuang's eyes reddened slightly. With a trembling hand, she took the items from Lin Shi. Thank you. Lin Shi put Qin Shuang's bag of gold into his own backpack. I have to go. It'll be dark soon. It was only a little past 3 in the afternoon, but the sky was already starting to darken. The extreme cold made the nights much longer than the days. Without lights, the night was infinitely more dangerous than the day. What's your name? Qin Shuang's voice came from behind him. Lin Shi thought for a moment, then answered without turning back. My name is Li Erhao. Before nightfall, Lin Shi and the Demon King returned to the safe room. Once back, he checked the Demon King's wound again. It was healing incredibly fast and had stopped bleeding completely. Lin Shi once again marveled at the astonishing recovery ability of a primal beast. After carefully treating the deeper wound, he let the Demon King rest in the living room. He went into the storage room and locked the door. Taking out the corpse of the lynx cat, he heard a prompt, unclaimed primal power detected. Absorb? Yes. Without a moment's hesitation, Lin Shi confirmed. Just like when he absorbed the wild boar, a warm current flowed from his arm into his body. An indescribably wonderful sensation spread through him, the magical feeling of life's essence being elevated. Suddenly, Lin Shi's body shuddered. A gene lock in his body opened automatically. As shock washed over him, an unprecedented surge of power filled his being. This as Lin Shi felt the changes in his body with astonishment. The sensation was too miraculous. Unbelievable. Not only was his mind as clear as when he unlocked the first-tier gene lock, but the strength in his body was also continuously increasing. He suddenly felt like he could fight a primal beast with his bare hands. Lin Shi threw a test punch into the air. The force of the punch tore through the air with a whoosh. His mind instantly calculated the punch's intensity. It was 10 times stronger than before, far surpassing what a human should be capable of. And that was just a casual punch from Lin Shi. This was the second-tier gene lock. Lin Shi was stunned. He jumped in place and lightly touched the ceiling. He tried running a few steps, and in a flash, he had crossed from one end of the storage room to the other. At that speed, in the not-so-large room, Lin Shi went from accelerating to stopping in one smooth motion. He managed to stop just before hitting the wall without a collision. This required perfect control over his strength. If a normal person's strength and speed suddenly increased, not only would they be unable to adapt in a short time, but their limbs might become uncoordinated, even leading to self-injury. It would take time and practice to adapt, but while his genes were activated, Lin Shi's brain could precisely control the force of every part of his body, and the power within him felt like an endless torrent. This feeling was too powerful. This time, the gene activation lasted for 8 seconds. After he exited the activated state, Lin Shi felt dizzy. He knelt on one knee, his limbs weak, and his body ached all over, but it was much better than the first time he'd activated his genes. It's probably because I've absorbed the primal power of 2 primal beasts, Lin Shi thought to himself. He had been told that the side effects of gene activation would get progressively worse, but his condition was actually improving. Primal power. Lin Shi realized primal power was the key. Could absorbing the primal power of 2 first-tier primal beasts in a row be enough to activate the second-tier gene lock? Or had my body already absorbed a small amount of primal matter before? He wondered. Lin Shi was completely unaware that the treasure basin had automatically absorbed primal matter while he was unconscious. Otherwise, he wouldn't have this question. After resting for about 10 minutes, although Lin Shi's limbs still felt a bit weak, he had gradually recovered. He tried to activate the gene lock again, but there was no response. The power from gene activation was immense, but Lin Shi still hadn't figured out how to trigger it at will. Other than in life-or-death situations or when his emotions peaked, Lin Shi hadn't found any other way to voluntarily activate his genes. Moreover, after observing the battle between the Demon King and the Lynx Cat, Lin Shi discovered that, unlike humans, other animal species didn't seem to have the concept or ability of gene activation. They just directly enhanced their physical strength and underwent some external morphological changes. The evolutionary paths of humans and primal beasts were completely different. For now, everything was still in an exploratory phase. Lin Shi could only slowly learn and uncover the mysteries within. He stored the lynx cat's corpse in his space and then opened the storage room door. The Demon King was waiting at the door. He didn't know for how long. Waiting for me? Lin Shi was a little surprised. He knelt down and petted the Demon King. The Demon King circled Lin Shi twice, sniffing him continuously, as if confirming something. "What's up?" Lin Shi asked with a smile. The Demon King nuzzled its nose into Lin Shi's palm. Its intelligent eyes showed affection, as well as a hint of fear. Lin Shi thought the Demon King was hungry, so he patted its head and said, "Are you hungry? Come on, let's eat." After a hearty dinner, Lin Shi took out all the gold, diamond, and platinum jewelry he had collected today from his space and spread it on the living room floor. The gold alone weighed over 100 kilograms, including the silver, rose gold, and diamonds. It was nearly 200 kilograms. The entire living room floor sparkled with a metallic sheen, dazzlingly brilliant. Byproducts cannot be used for upgrades. These items have no replication value other than for upgrades. Lin Shi looked at the treasure basin interface before him. Treasure basin. Capacity 96, 96, 96. Points required for upgrade 32,000. Item replication function 21. Points required for upgrade 58,500. He knelt down, placed his hand on the pile of jewelry, took a light breath and said, "Upgrade the item replication function." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden interface before him flashed, and a large portion of the small mountain of jewelry instantly vanished. The treasure basin interface updated. Treasure basin. Capacity 96 96 96. Financial points required for upgrade 32,000. Item replication function 45. Financial points required for upgrade 160,000. The number of item replications increases by a pattern, the first time plus 6, the second time plus 12, the third time plus 24. This was Lin Shi's fourth upgrade, so it increased by 24 uses. At the same time, the amount of precious metal required for the next upgrade changed significantly. It was 80,000 before. After Lin Shi used the spare gold to upgrade the replication function, the number dropped to 58,000. This time, it skyrocketed to 160,000. 160,000 financial points was equivalent to 16 kilograms of gold. Rose gold and silver could also be absorbed, but they didn't have the same 1-to-1 ratio as gold. It took several kilograms to get 1 financial point. As for diamonds, the treasure basin seemed to have little interest in this popular gemstone. In other words, the treasure basin only absorbed rare precious metals. Lin Shi pushed those thoughts aside and continued to upgrade the replication function. Fifth upgrade, item replications plus 48, 320,000 financial points needed for the next upgrade. Sixth upgrade, item replications plus 96, 640,000 financial points needed for the next upgrade. Lin Shi glanced at the pile of gold and silver jewelry on the floor. It had shrunk by more than half. Following this pattern, the next upgrade would require over 1,000,000 financial points. The current amount of gold and silver was definitely not enough. He once again initiated an upgrade. This time, the number of item replications increased by 192. Treasure basin, capacity, 96,96,9696. Financial points required for upgrade, 32,000. Item replication function, 381. Financial points required for upgrade, 1,240,000. The remaining gold and jewelry, Lin Shi estimated, could be exchanged for about 400,000 to 500,000 financial points. As expected, it was still a long way from upgrading the replication function to the next level. Lin Shi decided to upgrade the storage capacity. After the previous 5 upgrades, the capacity had reached its current size. The amount of gold needed to upgrade the capacity was much less than for the replication function. He guessed that just 4 or 5 more upgrades would be enough. Upgrade the entire storage capacity, Lin Shi said decisively. The moment he spoke, all the jewelry under his hand, except for the diamonds, vanished without a trace. This upgrade of the treasure basin clearly took much longer. After 4 changes on the interface, the information was displayed. Treasure basin, capacity, 1456, 1456, 1456. Continue to accumulate 985,755 financial points to obtain complete storage capacity. Item replication function, 381. Financial points required for upgrade, 1,240,000. Complete storage capacity. Lin Shi was slightly stunned. He had always had a feeling that if he upgraded the treasure basin to a certain limit, some unexpected changes might occur. He just didn't expect it to happen so soon. Lin Shi's heart began to beat faster. Previously, the storage capacity had been upgraded 5 times. Now, it had been upgraded another 4 times. Did that mean it could only be upgraded a maximum of 10 times? Lin Shi took out a pen and paper, quietly calculated, and then stood up. According to the treasure basin's pattern, each upgrade required double the financial points of the previous one. The 10th upgrade should have originally required 512,000 financial points. But now, after absorbing all the spare gold and silver, he was still short by more than 980,000 points. Lin Shi frowned. In other words, the final upgrade didn't just require double the financial points, but 4 times as much. The item replication had been upgraded 7 times. If it also had a maximum of 10 upgrades, then he would still need 2,820,000 financial points. In other words, he still needed to collect more than 2 tons of gold or many other types of precious metals. Lin Shi immediately opened the map of Xia City to take a look. The jewelry stores he had already cleaned out were marked on the map. On the map, there weren't many jewelry stores left. The inner city of Xia City wasn't large. In just one day, he had visited 60% of the jewelry stores. The remaining ones were scattered in the suburbs. Not only would the collection speed be slower, but the number of gold and silver stores was also smaller. Collecting from so far away, it would be difficult to gather more than 2 tons. Lin Shi pondered for a moment, then suddenly thought of the bank vaults, but he immediately dismissed the idea. Today, while out collecting supplies, Lin Shi had observed that most banks were tightly locked. Even though they were unguarded, the bank walls were all anti-demolition walls, and the glass was bulletproof. Not to mention the bank vaults, which were rumored to be able to withstand bomb blasts. Even if unguarded, with the destructive power of the incendiaries in his space, breaking the bulletproof glass was already extremely difficult, let alone opening a bank vault. It was simply a fantasy. Lin Shi glanced at his hand. It was unclear whether the treasure basin's space could pass through the bank vault walls to suck the gold inside into the space. Thinking of this, he immediately stood up and walked towards the wall. To know if it was possible was very simple. A test in his own safe room would tell. The outer walls of his safe room were over 3 meters thick, but the partitions between the rooms inside were not that thick. Each wall was only about 20 centimeters thick. I'll try it in my own room first. Lin Shi placed his hand on the wall connecting to the bedroom, closed his eyes, and used all his will to connect with the space. When his will connected with the space, his consciousness always had a vague feeling, as if it could spread out. Previously, when taking things from shipping containers and suitcases, he had the feeling that his consciousness could lightly touch the items inside. But now, as his consciousness had just formed the intention of taking things from the room, his mind was struck by a sharp, needle-like pain. Lin Shi immediately cut off the connection with the space. His whole body slumped to the ground. Seeing this, the Demon King quickly ran to Lin Shi's side, anxiously circling him. Lin Shi tried to suppress the nausea and dizziness, smiled at the anxious Demon King, and said, "I'm fine." Lin Shi rested for a long time before the uncomfortable nausea subsided. By now, his excitement had cooled by half. He didn't believe in anything supernatural. He tried with other objects. From a bowl, to an iron box, to a wardrobe, everything he could think of was tested. Finally, Lin Shi figured out the limit of retrieving objects from a distance. Whether remote retrieval was successful was related to the thickness of the barrier, and also to its density. To retrieve an object from a container remotely, first, no matter what the object was, the thickest part of the container could not exceed 5 centimeters. Second, the denser the container, the lower the thickness limit. For example, Lin Shi used several metal plates to form a box. He then found that if it exceeded 3 centimeters, a situation similar to when he wanted to take things from the living room to the bedroom would occur. It seems this path is not feasible. Lin Shi rubbed his temples. To retrieve objects remotely through a container, it must be something with thin thickness and low density. The bank vault obviously did not meet this condition. It seemed the only way was to wait until he had collected all the jewelry stores in Xia City, then go to other cities around Xia City to collect. The second day he went out, Lin Shi still hadn't given up on the idea of going to the bank. He spent more than half a day breaking the lock and finally entered the vault from the back door. Lin Shi once again tasted the feeling of dizziness and nausea, as if someone had hit him hard on the head. This time, he was completely desperate. The bank vault was not only thick, but also had multiple layers and a complex structure. Ordinary force could absolutely not open it. The vault door lock alone was extremely complex. Even if the lock was destroyed, the door could not be opened. With no other choice, he had to painstakingly go and collect gold from the jewelry stores. That whole day, Lin Shi swept through the remaining jewelry stores in the inner city. In total, he only collected less than a few dozen kilograms of gold and some jewelry. This amount was still far from his goal. After converting all that gold into asset points to upgrade the space, the treasure basin showed capacity 1456 x 1456, 1456. Still need to accumulate a 153,673 asset points to complete the capacity. Item replication function, 381. Asset points required for upgrade, 1,240,000. He was only short a little over 150 kilograms of gold to be able to upgrade the space to the maximum level. Lin Shi couldn't help but feel excited. On the third day after the snowstorm, after practicing the longevity art, Lin Shi discovered that it was snowing heavily outside. The heavy snow affected visibility, but fortunately, the wind was not strong. He could still go out to find gold. The Demon King had not fully recovered yet. Lin Shi didn't take it with him yesterday, and today he still left it at home. Considering the possibility that the snow would get heavier in case he was trapped by a snowstorm and couldn't return, Lin Shi prepared enough food for the Demon King for several days before going out. Today, Lin Shi's target was the suburban area. As soon as he arrived in the suburbs, Lin Shi felt a different atmosphere. Perhaps not just the suburbs, but the entire Xia city had changed. The number of people out searching for supplies today was significantly less than the previous 2 days. For the past 2 days, on the streets, as soon as someone passed by with supplies, others would rush to rob them. Stabbings constantly occurred before Lin Shi's eyes. The ground, covered in snow, besides the chaotic footprints, often had glaring red bloodstains on the white snow. Yesterday, Lin Shi even saw 2 young girls who seemed to be looking for things, being dragged into a dark, deserted shop by 3 burly men. Their desperate cries for help lasted only a moment before falling silent. Lin Shi, with his luxurious attire, was unsurprisingly considered a target. Unfriendly gazes were constantly directed at him. With his current second-tier gene-unlocked physique and 8 years of killing experience in the apocalypse, anyone who dared to approach him was dealt with swiftly. Knowing that life and death situations could trigger gene unlocking in people, Lin Shi acted even more decisively, agile, lethal, never needing more than one strike. The whole world was immersed in a pure white, but people's hearts had turned black. After killing the fifth clueless person of the day, Lin Shi didn't want to be disturbed anymore. He directly strapped the bloody military dagger to his belt. As expected, the number of people looking for trouble decreased significantly. At noon, while Lin Shi was eating, an old woman of about 50, with a kind face and wearing a tattered cotton coat, entered his small print shop. "Young man, please be kind. Can you give me some food? I haven't eaten in 2 days." Lin Shi coldly glanced at the approaching old woman, his voice icy. "Take one more step, and you die." The old woman stopped, wiping the corners of her eyes. "Heaven gives no way to live. My children are all in other provinces. I'm just an old woman suffering here alone. Young man, I don't need much, just a little. I'll trade this cotton coat with you." The old woman still stood at the door, not giving up. Trading a warm cotton coat for a bite to eat sounded reasonable. Perhaps some people would grit their teeth and trade for some food. Lin Shi's eyes grew colder. He got up and walked towards the old woman. The old woman thought Lin Shi had agreed, and a look of joy appeared on her face. But as Lin Shi got closer, a cruel glint flashed in the old woman's eyes. A sharp steel hammer hidden in her cotton coat was revealed. However, before she could raise her hand, a cold light flashed. The old woman's eyes spun. The last image she saw was Lin Shi holding a sharp, bloody knife, standing in front of a familiar, headless corpse. "That's my body." That was the old woman's last thought. Lin Shi sheathed his knife, dragged the old woman's body out the door, casually gave a cold glance at the few probing eyes around, then returned to the shop to continue eating. In the afternoon, while Lin Shi was cleaning up the gold, he suddenly heard a commotion. The noise was not from nearby but from the high-rise buildings. It came from the residential area. "The soldiers are here. The army has come. We're saved, soldier. Save me. I haven't eaten in 3 days." For the past 2 days, people in the residential area had been desperately calling for the army, calling for the country to save them. Lin Shi had already guessed in his heart that the army would soon take action, because yesterday, he had managed to get to another port and found that most of the containers had been opened and the useful supplies had been taken by people. Recalling the scene of meeting the soldiers that day, Lin Shi had no doubt that for the past few days, the army had been ordered to urgently collect supplies. This was a wise decision. Without supplies to appease them, even if the army was used to maintain order in the city, the survivors on the verge of starvation would still be dissatisfied. Under the control of hunger and cold, they would even confront the army, causing chaos and riots. This proved that the highest-ranking commander of the Shia City Army was not a conservative person. As expected, the army finally took action. Fully equipped troops with sharp weapons appeared everywhere in Shia City. But what disappointed the survivors was that these soldiers were not carrying the supplies they longed for, but rather sheets of paper that looked like flyers. These soldiers seemed to not see the corpses on the streets, as if they were carrying out the task of posting advertisements before the apocalypse. They pasted these papers in conspicuous places in the city. Some soldiers, upon meeting people, directly handed the paper into their hands. Lin Shi also received a handwritten paper, or rather, he picked up the flyer and read it carefully. Due to the recent abnormal climate, communication with other cities has been interrupted. Special situations require special handling. The army will adopt extreme weather response measures. Notice 1. Starting tomorrow, unless there is a blizzard, citizens can go to the Shanghai guest house next to the eastern suburbs. Bring your ID card to line up and register your personal information to receive 1 week's worth of survival supplies. Families with elderly or children can bring their identification documents to collect on their behalf. Those who have already taken supplies from high-risk areas will have them confiscated and will permanently lose their right to receive supplies. Notice 2. The army will build a shelter in the eastern suburbs of Shia City. Anyone who participates in the construction of the shelter for a full 100 days will receive residency rights there. Each construction participant will receive an additional 2 meals per day and 1 set of warm clothing per month. Requirements: age 16 to 45, healthy, no chronic diseases. Those with special skills are preferred. Notice 3. Due to the need for shelter construction, those who contribute building materials will receive contribution points based on the quantity contributed. Reaching 500 contribution points will grant residency rights at the shelter. Details on exchanging contribution points for supplies will be posted at the Shanghai guest house next to the eastern suburbs. Notice 4. Starting today, each district will have an armed patrol team daily. Citizens are prohibited from looting, murder, rape, and other illegal acts. Violators will be shot on sight. At the end, there was a section of official text, which Lin Shi skimmed through once. He wasn't wrong. The eastern suburbs had indeed caught the government's attention. Even before asking Liao Peng to search, he had noticed that area in the eastern suburbs. After all, there weren't many suitable locations for building a shelter. His small defensive area was in the western suburbs, very far from the eastern suburbs. The terrain was high, the area was small. Even if Zhang Qiu acquired the land, he couldn't get more than 300 square meters of his land. Therefore, he felt at ease building his defenses. A moment later, people poured out of their houses. They surrounded the soldiers who were distributing flyers. "Comrade, do you have any food? I'm about to die. I'm so cold. Do you have any extra clothes? Sir, my child is sick. Do you have any medicine?" The surrounded soldiers could only explain repeatedly. "We didn't bring any supplies. You can go to the eastern suburbs to get them tomorrow. It's all written clearly on the flyer. Please step aside and let us complete our mission." Seeing that these soldiers really didn't bring any supplies, the crowd immediately erupted. "What's the use of this stupid flyer when our lives are on the line? You guys are too late. My father is already dead. If you had come sooner, maybe my father would still be alive. My father was only in his 60s. Don't you guys carry food when you go out? Do you know how much we, the people, are suffering? What kind of soldiers are you?" The number of people surrounding them grew. It seemed they wouldn't let them go unless they got something. Bang, a gunshot rang out. The crowd instantly fell silent, but immediately after, it became even noisier. Some people even started to fight. A burly leader forcefully pushed the soldier who had just fired his gun. With wide eyes, he said, "If you have the guts, shoot me. I'll tell you straight right here today. If you don't have supplies, don't even think about leaving. Let's see if you dare to pull the trigger." "That's right. Don't even think about leaving. Your guns are for shooting the enemy, not us, the people. Let's see what they dare to do." The responses echoed endlessly in the crowd. The conflict was tense to the extreme. Lin Shi still stood calmly by the side of the road, observing. He wanted to see how the commander of the Xia City army had instructed his soldiers. To be able to develop Xia City into the largest shelter, the commander must have extraordinary methods. A gunshot rang out. The most aggressive man from before looked down in disbelief at the bloody hole blooming on his chest and fell. The crowd was completely silent. The leading officer coldly swept his gaze over the crowd. "Troublemakers. You want supplies? Go to the eastern suburbs tomorrow. For now, get lost." The crowd hurriedly dispersed. Lin Shi memorized everything. He glanced at the sky and left the place with the crowd. The gold collected today was enough to upgrade the space. He planned to go back first and check out the eastern suburbs tomorrow. Now that he was living peacefully in Xia City, he needed to understand the ruler of this place. On his way back, passing by the entrance of Wolong village, Lin Shi noticed the villagers were holding a funeral. For the past 2 days, he had left early and returned late, hardly encountering the villagers of Wolong. From a distance, he could see that most of the houses in the village were draped in white cloth. It seemed quite a few people had died, but at this time, with the next snowstorm's arrival unknown, the villagers still had the mind to worry about funerals. Lin Shi didn't know whether to call them foolish or naive. He quickly returned to the safe room. After greeting the Demon King, he took out the gold and other precious metals he had collected today. His heart was a mix of nervousness, excitement, and anxiety, but mostly anticipation. Lin Shi took a deep breath and said silently, "Upgrade the storage space." More than half of the gold and jewelry in his hand disappeared. A dazzling golden light suddenly erupted from Lin Shi's chest. The entire treasure basin interface before his eyes danced like garbled code. Lin Shi's body shook as he intently observed the changes before him. The last time the treasure basin interface had changed so violently was when it absorbed the second ancient artifact. Lin Shi's heart involuntarily sped up. The Demon King stood beside him, staring blankly. Although it was used to Lin Shi casually conjuring things, this time he was even glowing. This was the first time in its life it had seen a human glow on their own. The Demon King's mouth hung open, drool pooling on the floor without it even noticing. Its doggy eyes were filled with clear adoration. After a long while, the treasure basin interface reappeared. Treasure basin. Storage space. Complete. Volume can increase with the user's primal power. Can store living creatures. Item replication function. 381. Asset points required for upgrade. 1,040,000. Can store living creatures. Lin Shi skimmed past the lines above, his eyes fixed on the 5 words "can store living creatures." He understood the meaning of these 5 words. He hurriedly used his consciousness to check the space. Before his eyes, the entire space had expanded immensely. The items inside had become tiny. Previously, the nearly 10,000 containers of supplies collected at the port had initially taken up 1/3 of the space. After yesterday's 4 upgrades, those supplies only occupied a 10,000th of a remote corner of the space. But now, the entire space seemed to be divided in two. One side was still the vast vacuum as before. The other side had a piece of land the size of a football field. Lin Shi appeared in an empty, barren space, like a wasteland. There was only a puddle of gray-black mud, and nothing else. He wanted to test it immediately. Of course, he wouldn't use the Demon King as an experiment. The Demon King was his companion. If anything went wrong, he would regret it immensely. Lin Shi stepped out of the safe room and looked around. In the vast world, there was only white snow. Not a single living creature could be seen. His gaze immediately turned towards the foot of the mountain, where the villagers were. In Wolong village, Wang Liang, with a gloomy face, went from house to house in the village. "Uncle Wang, it's chaotic outside. Do you see any way to simplify the funeral for our relatives, or to handle it quickly?" Wang Liang said to a villager. The man called Uncle Wang replied in an angry tone, "Simplify? Who knows when the next snowstorm will come? Leaving my father's body in the house for 10 days or half a month is hard to do. The dead must be buried with dignity. Besides, with so many children and grandchildren here now, arranging a funeral is already very simple." "You want it even simpler?" Wang Liang said angrily. "The dead are dead, but the living must go on. We can't let the dead make the living suffer. My father lived in this village and did so many things. Liangzi, the village chief, always told us that as people, we shouldn't be selfish. We are a collective. We must advance and retreat together. Do you want my father's body to be exposed in the fields? Don't say such heartless things." Wang Liang ran to more than 10 houses and received similar answers. He cursed under his breath, his face pale as he walked away. The old village chief had wanted to groom Wang Liang as his successor. If he had a few more years, after the village chief handed over his duties and passed away, he would surely become the next village chief. But now, the village chief had passed away suddenly, and he had no prestige in the village yet. The villagers didn't listen to him at all. They insisted on holding funerals for the dead in the village. In the past few days, almost every family in the village had someone die. Unlike the apartment complexes in the city, thanks to the village chief's many years of effort, the people in the village were basically very united. With so many relatives and friends suddenly passing away, someone suggested holding funerals according to the old customs, and everyone else unanimously agreed. The village was located in the suburbs. Every family in the village had stored food, and had the habit of drying vegetables and making cured meat. So for the time being, it was not as chaotic as in the city, but Wang Liang had been outside to see. Outside, people were looting and killing for a little food and clothing, but they were not trying to find a way to deal with it. When the food in the village ran out, they would be just like those people outside. This was why Wang Liang was so anxious and angry. At this moment, he felt like he was the only sober person among a crowd of drunks. He suddenly realized that the village chief's ideals could not cope with the current situation. Wang Liang angrily walked away, reaching the foot of the mountain. He kicked a pile of snow hard, cursing, "It's all that bastard on the mountain's fault." Wang Liang cursed continuously, even cursing Lin Shi's ancestors. Only in this way could he vent the anger in his heart. If he hadn't met Lin Shi, he would still be in the village, waiting to become the next village chief. Suddenly, Wang Liang realized there was a figure behind him. He was about to turn around when a hand slapped his shoulder. Lin Shi came down the mountain and saw a lone villager. He planned to use this villager to test the space. The people in this village all held a grudge against him. Testing would be more convenient. Coincidentally, Lin Shi happened to hear Wang Liang cursing him. Lin Shi let out a cold laugh, placed his hand on Wang Liang's shoulder, and activated his will. Wang Liang turned around and looked straight into Lin Shi's eyes. Both of them were stunned.
Lin Shi thought, "Why isn't the space reacting?" Wang Liang thought, "You look familiar." Wang Liang's eyes suddenly widened in terror. Before he could react, Lin Shi knocked him unconscious with a heavy blow. Again, Lin Shi connected with the space. This time, there was no obstacle. Wang Liang vanished from Lin Shi's sight. A living being must be unconscious to be brought into the space. Lin Shi frowned, checking the situation inside the space. In the empty space, a person suddenly appeared, lying face down on the ground. It was Wang Liang, the man Lin Shi had just knocked out. Lin Shi slightly adjusted his thoughts, and Wang Liang reappeared on the snow-covered ground. He found a secluded, uninhabited place, and stuffed a handful of snow into Wang Liang's shirt. Soon, Wang Liang woke up from the cold. Seeing Lin Shi, he was about to scream in horror. Lin Shi was prepared. A powerful punch landed on Wang Liang's mouth, silencing his scream. "Don't talk, or I'll kill you instantly." Lin Shi's eyes were filled with killing intent. Wang Liang nodded repeatedly. That single punch had knocked out several of his teeth.
Lin Shi tried to pull Wang Liang into the space again. This time, he clearly felt a resistance when trying to pull the person into the space. It couldn't succeed. Wang Liang's mouth was full of blood. He looked in horror at Lin Shi's hand placed on him, motionless. The extreme fear made him unable to comprehend what Lin Shi was trying to do. "Listen to me," Lin Shi said coldly to Wang Liang. "No matter what you feel, do not resist. Otherwise, I'll kill you. Understand?" Wang Liang nodded like a puppet. Lin Shi connected with the space again. This time the resistance was weaker, but still not enough. It still failed. A second later, Lin Shi's hand clamped down on Wang Liang's throat. His hand slowly tightened. Wang Liang's eyes rolled back as he struggled to resist. Lin Shi immediately used his other hand to break Wang Liang's arm, preventing him from struggling. With his current strength, breaking someone's arm was a small matter. Lin Shi tightened his grip even more. Throughout the process, he kept using his will to control the space, trying to pull Wang Liang in. It wasn't until Wang Liang's eyes rolled back that Lin Shi let go, and he finally succeeded. Wang Liang wasn't dead, but he was on the verge of suffocation. Suddenly released, he coughed violently. Before he could look around, he was pulled out of the space by Lin Shi. Just like that, Lin Shi tested it over and over again. Finally, he confirmed that to pull someone into the space, that person must be incapable of resistance or in a very weak state. Time in the space flowed normally, and the person inside could still breathe and move. Although he couldn't pull in a normal person, this was still better than he had expected. After all, he didn't necessarily have to use it on people. The consciousness, or rather the willpower of animals, was weaker than that of humans. It might be easier to pull them into the space. Lin Shi had the idea to go back and test it with the Demon King to confirm. Lin Shi glanced at the dying Wang Liang, then broke his neck. As his neck was snapped, Wang Liang's eyes even showed a look of relief. Today had been more terrifying than a nightmare for him. If there was a next life, he would absolutely not dare to curse people behind their backs again. That was Wang Liang's last thought. For safety, Lin Shi found 2 more lone villagers to experiment on. As night was about to fall, most of the villagers were at home preparing dinner. Previously, Liao Peng had counted 96 families, with a total population of no more than 400 people. In the past few days, nearly half of the villagers had died. When some people saw Lin Shi, they immediately rushed to fight him. This time, Lin Shi did not spare them. The army might return to the village tomorrow to distribute flyers. After these villagers received more supplies, who knows if they would come looking for trouble again. The hatred between him and these villagers could not be resolved. Lin Shi didn't mind spending the effort to send them on their way. There were still some who slipped through the net. Lin Shi used a thermal imaging device to find and kill each hiding villager. Then he cleaned up the bodies and put them into the space, returning to the safe room. The killing intent on Lin Shi had not yet dissipated. Seeing the Demon King come to greet him, his eyes were red with bloodlust. He said, "Demon King, let's play a game." The Demon King instinctively took 2 steps back. "Come on." Seeing the Demon King's reaction, Lin Shi knew he was in a state that frightened it. Having just killed so many people, the aura of death and violence on him was very heavy. He went to take a shower, washing off the smell of blood. Then he went into the kitchen and personally made his favorite braised fish with rice porridge. Cooking helped him calm his mind. More than 20 minutes later, the fragrant braised fish with rice porridge was ready. Lin Shi ate several bowls of rice and didn't forget to give the Demon King a few pieces of fresh wild boar meat. After eating, Lin Shi's state of mind was much better. He waved at the Demon King. "Demon King, let's play a game." Lin Shi slowly guided it. "I'll take you to a place. You help me see if that place is fun. Don't be afraid, I'll bring you right back." The Demon King tilted its head, thinking about Lin Shi's words. Lin Shi placed his hand on the Demon King's head and connected his consciousness with the space. A few seconds later, the Demon King appeared bewildered in the middle of the empty land in the space. In Lin Shi's consciousness, as soon as the Demon King appeared in the space, it jumped up, vigilantly observing its surroundings, and let out an anxious growl. "Woof! Grr! Grr!" Lin Shi hurriedly brought the Demon King back from the space. The Demon King was back in the familiar safe room. Seeing Lin Shi, its eyes lit up with a joy that was about to overflow. It almost rushed into Lin Shi's arms. Lin Shi patiently explained, reassuring the Demon King several times, then sent it into the space again. This time, the Demon King was no longer as anxious as before. It ran and jumped happily in the space. This space was about the size of a basketball court. When the Demon King ran to the edge, it was stopped by an invisible wall. Lin Shi tried to use his will to communicate with the Demon King. "Demon King, can you hear me?" The Demon King looked up, looking around the space. Seeing the Demon King's reaction, Lin Shi was secretly happy. It turned out to be possible. He gave another command. Demon King, try digging the ground. Although the Demon King found it strange why it couldn't see its master, but could still hear his voice, it still obediently dug the ground on the spot. Its strong hind legs quickly dug a pit. Lin Shi brought the Demon King out of the space. The Demon King was still in the digging posture. Suddenly, it found itself back home. It was once again bewildered. Turning its head, Lin Shi felt the corners of his mouth were about to reach his ears. Heh heh. Lin Shi laughed out loud, his heart filled with joy. The thought in his mind became clearer and more intense. Since people were unreliable, he would try to build his own army of primal beasts in this apocalypse. Only in this way could he avenge the Shen family. Lin Shi squatted down, patted the Demon King's head, his eyes firm. Demon King, we must get stronger quickly. In the future, I will make you the king of the primal beasts. The next day, although the Demon King had recovered, Lin Shi still decided to go out alone. Today, he wanted to go to the eastern suburbs to check things out. To avoid attracting attention, Lin Shi deliberately changed into a normal coat and used a mask to cover his face. He took out Lier Hao's ID card. He put it in his pocket. Yesterday, he saw on the flyer that survivors had to register. To prevent any unforeseen circumstances, he brought it with him. He kept Lier Hao's ID card because although Lier Hao had a rather ordinary appearance, his face had some resemblance to his. He kept it in case he needed it. To make the disguise more convincing, Lin Shi even used an electric razor to shave his head bald, just like the photo on Lier Hao's ID card. Without a mask, the resemblance was already 50%. If the army's inspectors were not careful, it would be difficult to spot. Lin Shi nodded in satisfaction in front of the mirror, left enough food for the Demon King, and went down the mountain. He went straight towards the eastern suburbs. On the way, he met many people, all heading in the same direction. Obviously, they had also received the notice to go to the eastern suburbs. The road was quite peaceful today. No one dared to act rashly. On the road, he occasionally encountered army patrol teams. Just walking from the western suburbs to the eastern suburbs would take a whole day. Lin Shi found a deserted place, took out his snowmobile, and rode a long distance, avoiding the crowd. He put the vehicle back into his space when he was near the eastern suburbs. Finally, he arrived at the eastern suburbs at noon. When he arrived, Lin Shi found that although he had come quickly, he was not early. Many residents of the eastern suburbs had already surrounded the gate of the Shanghai guest house. There were also many survivors who had received the notice yesterday and had rushed to the eastern suburbs. Although the night was 10 to 20 degrees colder than the day, some had sick family members, were hungry, and cold. They disregarded the cold and desperately ran to the eastern suburbs. Many survivors were pale from hunger, their steps unsteady. The crowd was chaotic, and the noise of people was deafening. Lin Shi couldn't even see the gate of the Shanghai guest house. He had come to understand the situation, but he didn't rush forward. He stood quietly outside the crowd and observed. A moment later, a piercing siren sounded from the front of the crowd. Then a rough voice echoed everywhere. Quiet down for me, all of you. Form 5 lines. Anyone who causes trouble gets one word. Death. The cold, murderous tone was enough to make the survivors terrified. Next, the sound of rifles being loaded echoed from the line of soldiers standing neatly in front of the guesthouse gate, quickly quelling the chaos of the crowd. A moment later, the quick-witted survivors had quickly formed lines. Everyone pushed and shoved to get into the lines. Lin Shi stood at the end of one line. At this time, a younger voice, no longer as sharp and murderous as the previous one, came from the loudspeaker. Everyone, please line up, take out your ID cards, and register your information to receive supplies at the residence. One ID card gets one portion of supplies. Family members collecting on behalf of others need to present a household registration book or marriage certificate. You are not allowed to collect supplies for others. If discovered, you will be permanently deprived of the right to receive supplies. Everyone, please collect your supplies responsibly. Those with lost or fake ID cards can go to the right to register for verification. These are special times. To prevent theft, we must be strict. We hope for everyone's understanding. Anyone who wants to apply for a job can go to the left to register for an interview. Standing at the back and observing, Lin Shi saw that the speed of the line's movement was not slow, so he guessed that the inspection was not too strict. After a while, a commotion suddenly broke out at the front. My surname is Chen. My son and my wife's surname is Huang. What's the problem that you won't let me collect? A man at the head of the line shouted excitedly. The registration staff said, to collect for family members, you must present a household registration book or the couple's identification documents along with the marriage certificate. I ran here from the South District. How could I bring those documents with me? Without documents, you can only receive your own share. Hey, I'm telling you, aren't you supposed to be serving the people? Is this your service attitude? Believe it or not, I'll report you. The man was about to say more when suddenly a cold gun barrel was pressed against the back of his neck. Did you understand what he said? With documents, you can collect for them. Without them, you only get your own share. Now either go get your share or go home and get your documents. Anyone who causes trouble. This rough voice was the same one from the loudspeaker earlier. The man wore a green military uniform, was tall and well-built, with a resolute face. One of his eyes was injured, making him look very fierce. The murderous tone and the cold sensation of the gun barrel against his neck made the man's legs go weak. He knelt on the ground. Yes, yes, yes. The man stood up, took a tag from the registration staff, and hurriedly ran through the passage on the right into the guest house. Many people who initially had the same intention as that man, upon seeing this scene, immediately gave up the idea. The line moved faster. Not long after, the people who had registered earlier came out of the guest house. Each person carried a large black bag. The people waiting in line immediately stared at the bag, wanting to see what was inside. A bold person in the line shouted, "Hey brother, what's in there?" The other person didn't answer, clutched the bag tightly, and hurriedly left. The line continued to move forward. After 3 hours, Lin Shi was near the front of the line. There were only a dozen or so people in front of him. After queuing for nearly half a day, he realized that, except for the rather strict inspection for cases of collecting for others, individuals receiving supplies only needed to register the information on their ID card and declare their job before the apocalypse to be allowed into the guest house to receive supplies. Those with occupations suitable for the construction of the shelter would be given priority. They were invited to another side. Lin Shi noticed the man standing in front of the team of soldiers. He exuded a powerful aura, his eyes sharp. His presence was no less intimidating than a whole line of soldiers holding guns. Earlier, a soldier ran up to report the situation to this person. Lin Shi vaguely heard the soldier call him Major General Lin. Could this be the commander of the Xia City Army? Lin Shi didn't dare to look for long, afraid of being discovered. Very quickly, it was Lin Shi's turn. He took out Li Erhao's ID card and handed it to the registration staff. The registration staff glanced at Lin Shi, recorded the age and gender on the card, and then asked, "What did you do before? Why are you wearing a mask?" Lin Shi coughed violently, his voice hoarse. "Ahem. I've been coughing a lot these past few days. I'm afraid I have the flu. Do you have any medicine? I used to be an accountant." The staff looked at the ID card and Lin Shi again, then handed both the ID card and a metal tag to Lin Shi, saying, "Go inside and get your supplies according to the sign." Next person. Lin Shi took the tag and walked into the guest house through the passage guarded by soldiers. Inside, there was no fear of getting lost. Every meter, there were 2 fully armed soldiers standing guard. A post every 5 steps, a station every 10. Just by following the path between the 2 lines of soldiers, you would reach the place to receive supplies. He picked up the cold metal tag to examine it. It was a rectangular piece of metal. The material seemed to be an aluminum alloy, stamped with the national emblem of the Xia Kingdom. It looked like it was temporarily cut from a large metal plate. It wasn't smooth, and you could cut your hand if you weren't careful. The process of making metal tags and receiving supplies inside the guest house seemed a bit redundant, but Lin Shi understood that if supplies were distributed directly at the gate, it would be difficult to store and transport them during blizzards or snowfall. In addition, many survivors seeing the supplies would easily become greedy, leading to looting, which would be difficult to control. Looting would lead to riots, and at that time, the guest house gate would be hard to defend. This method effectively channeled the flow of people and deterred wrongdoers. If anyone were to loot, it would be difficult to escape from this tight security system inside the guest house. This minimized chaos and accidents. A hard hand in a soft glove. That was just Lin Shi's speculation. There were probably many other reasons. Around a bend, a person who had just received supplies walked over. Lin Shi glanced at him and saw that this person looked familiar. Qian Liang hugged the supplies tightly in his chest. He was afraid of losing them. These past few days had been extremely hard for him. Initially, he managed to trick his way into getting 2 sets of clothes and some food, but soon he couldn't trick anyone anymore. He was even robbed and almost lost his life. After starving for 2 days straight, Qianliang had rushed here early in the morning to receive supplies. At this moment, Qianliang saw the person opposite him looking at him. That day, Lin Shi had his face covered and was wearing a hat, so Qianliang didn't recognize him. "What are you looking at?" Qianliang narrowed his eyes at Lin Shi, then quickly walked towards the guest house gate. Lin Shi remembered Qianliang, the person he had encountered a few days ago, then averted his gaze. These two, for some unknown reason, were about to meet again. The place to receive supplies was the guest house's main hall. When Lin Shi arrived, there was already a long line inside. However, it was not as crowded as the guest house entrance. Lin Shi had no choice but to line up at the end. A moment later, an old woman from the back pushed her way up, walked briskly to the front of the line, and very naturally cut in. Immediately, someone was dissatisfied. "Ma'am, why are you cutting in line?" The old woman put her hands on her hips and replied fiercely, "I'm old. My legs are tired from walking all day. It's only right for you young people to give way a little. Don't make a fuss. Don't you see those soldiers standing there so seriously without saying anything?" Everyone glanced at the soldiers who were still standing guard with cold faces. Many had no choice but to swallow their anger. But someone couldn't stand it and said, "Didn't we all walk a long way and wait in a long line? Does being old give you the right to act like that? Seeing how you walked all this way, your strength is no less than us young folks." The old woman looked at the person with contempt. "Young man, no one else is saying anything, only you keep harping on this. Can't you be more generous? Making a fuss won't do anyone any good. Just wait quietly. You'll regret not listening to your elders, you understand? An old person isn't scary. What's scary is an old person who's educated." This statement made the person feel as if they were being deliberately provoked, gritting their teeth in anger until they were speechless. "If you don't listen to your elders, how long can you be happy?" Just then, the young man standing in front of Lin Shi suddenly spoke up. He smiled and walked over, pulling the old woman out of the line with one hand. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect someone to dare to do that. Those who were annoyed by the old woman cutting in line all showed a look of joy. Although they didn't want to cause trouble, they were happy to see someone deal with this unpleasant old woman. Lin Shi also watched with interest. "What are you doing? Why are you pulling me?" The young man used considerable force. The old woman struggled but was still pulled out of the line. The old woman tried to cut back into the line. The people in the line immediately stood close together, not giving the old woman a chance. Seeing that she couldn't cut in anymore, the old woman pointed at the young man and scolded, "Are you crazy? I wasn't even cutting in front of you. Do you live by the sea? Why are you so nosy?" The young man just smiled. Then he turned to get back in line, this time standing behind Lin Shi. The old woman was furious, but she didn't dare to make a big scene. She walked up behind the young man and muttered, "You damn brat, see? You still have to get back in line. Thought you were doing a good deed? No one wants you back in line." The young man walked up to Lin Shi and asked, "Can I get back in line?" Lin Shi gestured for him to go ahead. The young man raised his eyebrows, glanced smugly at the fuming old woman, and then got back in line in front of Lin Shi. Lin Shi found this person quite interesting. It was just a switch of positions, before and after. It didn't matter whether he let him or not. What puzzled Lin Shi was the young man's attitude, actions, and gestures. The young man showed no signs of the negativity and despair that surrounded others in this apocalyptic situation. On the contrary, he still maintained the optimism and positive attitude of the peaceful times before. Previously, when everyone was still queuing, Lin Shi hadn't noticed this difference. But just through a few actions, he felt that this young man was truly different. Perhaps because Lin Shi had been staring at him for too long, the young man suddenly turned around and looked straight into his eyes. His eyes were clear, without any despair, vigilance, or weariness, emotions that almost everyone had in this situation. Instead, there was an emotion that Lin Shi couldn't understand. "Thanks," the young man smiled and said to Lin Shi. Lin Shi nodded, then lowered his eyes, not looking at him anymore. No matter how different he was, it had nothing to do with him. More than half an hour later, it was finally Lin Shi's turn to receive his supplies. Like the others, he handed the metal tag to the staff. After checking the tag, the person took a black bag from the cart behind him and handed it to Lin Shi. Although it was quite light, only about a dozen pounds. In another line, a person who received their supplies immediately opened it, then angrily threw it on the ground. "This is all? And you expect us to eat for a whole week? Are you trying to starve us?" Lin Shi glanced over. In the bag were a few packs of instant noodles, 3 loaves of bread, a smoked sausage, 2 candles, a box of matches, a few packets of cold medicine, and some vegetables that were frozen and spoiled. Dissatisfaction arose in the crowd. Perhaps because someone had caused trouble before, a soldier immediately walked over, picked up the bag, and said in a cold voice, "Don't talk so much. Figure it out for yourselves. Our brothers risked their lives, trading their limbs in the cold to bring these back. Even the Xia City army doesn't have enough adequate cold weather gear. Not to mention things like snow boots and waterproof gloves, which are almost impossible to find in Xia City." In the past few days, the process of collecting and transporting food has caused many soldiers to be seriously injured, some even losing fingers and toes to the cold. Everyone knows what the situation is like outside. The person finally couldn't say another word of defiance.